They say lightning never strikes the same place twice, but on the night Ethan Walker pulled a dying billionaire from the flames, he learned that fate doesn't follow rules. It rewrites them. What started as a rescue in an Oregon cornfield would become a battle against corporate espionage, hidden illness, and the ghosts of his own past. This is a story about ordinary courage meeting extraordinary circumstances, where a widowed mechanic and a tech genius discover that sometimes saving someone else is how you save yourself. Stay with me until the end, and comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels across the world. The storm came without warning. One moment, the October sky over Millfield, Oregon, hung heavy and gray, pregnant with the promise of rain. The next, it opened like a wound, dumping sheets of water across the Walker farm with such violence that Ethan could barely see 10 feet past his workshop window. Thunder cracked overhead, not the distant rumble of a typical autumn storm, but something close and furious, as if the heavens themselves were tearing apart. Ethan Walker stood at his workbench, grease-stained hands wrapped around a wrench, trying to focus on the carburetor spread before him like a mechanical puzzle. But concentration had become a luxury he couldn't afford. Not tonight. Not with the wind howling through the gaps in the barn walls and the rain hammering against the corrugated roof like 1,000 impatient fists. "Dad!" Maya's voice cut through the storm's roar. Ethan looked up to find his 12-year-old daughter standing in the workshop doorway, backlit by the yellow glow of the farmhouse kitchen. Her dark hair, so much like her mother's, hung in damp tangles around her face. She was supposed to be doing homework. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Ethan set down the wrench and wiped his hands on an already dirty rag. "The power just went out, and Dad—" Maya hesitated, her brown eyes wide. "There's something weird in the sky." Ethan felt a familiar tightness in his chest. Maya wasn't a kid who scared easily. She was smart, observant, grounded in a way that made him both proud and sad. She'd had to grow up too fast after Sarah died 3 years ago. Cancer didn't care that a little girl still needed her mother. It didn't care that a man still needed his wife. "What do you mean, weird?" Ethan moved toward the door and Maya stepped aside to let him pass. "Just come look." They ran together across the muddy yard, rain immediately soaking through Ethan's flannel shirt. The farmhouse loomed ahead, a 2-story colonial that had belonged to Sarah's grandparents. It needed a new roof and fresh paint, but it was home. The only home Maya had ever known. Inside, the kitchen was dark except for the emergency lantern Maya had placed on the table. Smart girl. Always thinking ahead. Through the window above the sink, Ethan could see nothing but rain and darkness and the occasional flash of lightning that turned the world briefly white. "There," Maya pointed. "Watch the sky toward the west." Ethan pressed his face close to the glass, breath fogging the cold pane. At first he saw nothing unusual, just the storm's fury, rain slanting sideways in the wind. Then lightning flashed again, and in that moment of illumination, he saw it. Lights. High up, moving erratically. Not stars. These were too bright, too low, and they weren't holding steady. They jerked and dipped, tracing a chaotic pattern against the black canvas of the storm. "A plane," Ethan breathed. "Is it supposed to move like that?" Maya asked, and the fear in her voice made something old and military snap to attention in Ethan's spine. "No, it's not." He'd seen enough during his 6 years as an Army combat engineer to recognize disaster in motion. Those lights weren't navigating through the storm. They were fighting against it, losing against it. As they watched, the lights tilted at an impossible angle. Even through the rain and distance, Ethan could hear it now. The high-pitched scream of jet engines straining, the mechanical shriek of something going catastrophically wrong. "Dad, it's coming toward us." She was right. The plane, and Ethan could see now it was smaller than a commercial airliner, probably a private jet, was descending fast. Too fast. The nose dipped sharply, then jerked up again as whoever was piloting fought for control. But the storm was relentless, wind shear battering the aircraft like a toy. "Maya, go to the basement, now." "But Dad, now!" He'd used his command voice, the one he'd sworn he'd never use with his daughter after he left the service. But this wasn't the time for discussion. This was the time for survival. Maya ran, and Ethan heard her footsteps pounding down the basement stairs. He should have followed her, should have taken cover. That's what any sensible person would do when a plane was about to crash on their property. But Ethan Walker had stopped being sensible the day they lowered Sarah into the ground. He burst out the front door and into the storm. Rain hit him like a wall, instantly plastering his clothes to his body. Wind nearly knocked him sideways. Above, the plane's lights were so close now he could make out the sleek white fuselage, could see flames trailing from one engine, orange and terrible against the black sky. The jet screamed overhead, maybe 200 feet up, and Ethan's heart seized. It was going to hit the house. He'd sent Maya to the basement, but if that thing came down on the farmhouse... At the last second, the nose lifted slightly. The plane cleared the house by maybe 30 feet, close enough that Ethan felt the heat from the burning engine, close enough that the roar of tortured metal and dying machinery drowned out even the thunder. Then it was past, hurtling toward the cornfield behind the barn. Ethan ran. His boots splashed through puddles, slipped on mud, but he kept moving. Behind him, he heard Maya screaming his name from the house, but he couldn't stop. Wouldn't stop. Someone was on that plane. Someone was about to die. The cornfield spread out in 30 acres of autumn-dried stalks, most of them already harvested, leaving stubbled earth and scattered sheaves. The plane hit in the center, and for a single suspended moment, it seemed almost gentle, a massive metal bird settling onto a rough nest. Then the world exploded. The fireball erupted upward in a column of orange and red that turned night into day. The shockwave knocked Ethan off his feet, sending him sprawling face first into the mud. Heat washed over him, so intense he felt his exposed skin begin to blister. Debris rained down, twisted metal, burning plastic, unidentifiable fragments of what had once been a multi-million-dollar aircraft. Ethan pushed himself up, ears ringing. The plane had broken into 3 main sections. The tail lay 20 yards to his left, already being consumed by flames. The midsection, what he thought was the passenger cabin, had separated and was sliding on its belly through the mud, leaving a long scar in the earth. The cockpit and nose section were somewhere in the inferno ahead, lost in the flames. No one could survive that. But as Ethan watched, the passenger section ground to a halt about 50 yards from the main fireball. Flames were already licking up the sides, but it wasn't fully engulfed. Not yet. Someone could be inside. "This is insane," Ethan muttered to himself. But his feet were already moving. He'd spent 3 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. He'd pulled wounded soldiers from burning Humvees, had run through active firefights to reach the injured, had defused IEDs while bullets zipped past his head. He'd been decorated for valor twice, though he'd thrown both medals in a drawer and tried to forget they existed. The Army had taught him 2 things: how to save lives and how to watch them end. After Sarah died, he'd thought he was done with both. Apparently, he'd been wrong. The heat intensified as he approached the wreckage. The passenger section lay on its side, one wing torn completely away, the other bent at a sickening angle. Through a shattered window, Ethan could see the interior. Expensive leather seats, polished wood paneling, now all crumpled and askew. And movement. Someone was inside, trying to crawl toward the exit. The main door hung partially open, jammed against the mud. Ethan grabbed the edge and pulled, muscles straining. It gave an inch, then another. His hand slipped on the wet metal and he lost his grip. "Come on!" He seized it again, planted his feet, and pulled with everything he had. The door screeched open, smoke poured out, thick and black and toxic. Ethan dropped to his knees, heat rises, the air's better low, and crawled into the wreckage. Inside was chaos. The impact had turned the luxury cabin into a nightmare of twisted metal and shattered glass. Seats had torn free from their moorings. Overhead compartments hung open, spilling luggage and equipment. A small fire burned in the rear, adding to the smoke. And there, halfway down the aisle, a woman lay crumpled against a bulkhead. She was in her late 30s, Asian features, black hair matted with blood. She wore what had probably been an expensive business suit, now torn and stained. Her eyes were closed, but Ethan saw her chest moving, breathing, still alive. "Hey!" He crawled toward her, broken glass cutting into his palms. "Can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open, dark brown, unfocused. "The pilot," she whispered. "I'm going to get you out." Ethan reached her side and quickly assessed her injuries. Combat medic training from a lifetime ago came flooding back. Head wound, bleeding, but not arterial. Left arm bent wrong, probably broken. Possible internal injuries. He couldn't tell without a proper exam. Behind them, something exploded with a muffled whump. The fire was spreading. "This is gonna hurt," Ethan warned, then slid his arms under her body. She gasped in pain as he lifted her, and he felt her blood soaking into his already wet shirt. She was lighter than he'd expected, maybe 5'5" and slight. But dead weight is always heavy, and the smoke was getting thicker. He turned toward the exit and froze. Flames now blocked the doorway, creeping up from the fuel-soaked ground outside. In seconds, they'd engulfed the entire cabin. "Other side?" the woman mumbled against his shoulder. "Window." Ethan looked where she indicated. A large window on the upward-facing side of the tilted cabin. It had shattered on impact, leaving a jagged opening to the rain-soaked sky. Getting out that way meant climbing while carrying her. While the plane burned. While his lungs filled with smoke and his vision started to blur. "Okay," he said. "Okay, we can do this." He carried her to the window, then set her down as gently as he could. She whimpered but stayed conscious. Ethan grabbed a seat cushion and used it to knock away the worst of the jagged glass. "I'm going to push you up and out," he told her. "Once you're through, just drop. It's not far to the ground on that side." She nodded weakly. Ethan lifted her again, this time pushing upward. She tried to help, her good arms scrabbling for purchase on the window frame. He felt glass cutting into his own arms as he boosted her higher. Almost there. Behind them, fire roared. The heat was unbearable now, searing Ethan's lungs with every breath. His vision swam. Just a few more seconds. The woman tumbled through the window and disappeared with a splash into the mud outside. Ethan jumped, grabbed the window frame, and hauled himself up. His arms shook with exhaustion, and for a terrible moment he thought he wouldn't make it. Then his military training kicked in one more time, and he pulled himself through with a final surge of adrenaline. He hit the ground hard, pain shooting through his shoulder. But there was no time to rest. The woman lay a few feet away, barely moving. Ethan crawled to her, got his arms around her again, and dragged her away from the wreckage. 20 yards, 30, 50. Behind them, the passenger section finally gave up its fight. The flames found something critical. Maybe hydraulic fluid, maybe pressurized oxygen tanks. And the entire structure erupted. The shockwave rolled over them, and Ethan threw himself across the woman's body, shielding her from the rain of debris. When he finally looked up, the entire crash site was a sea of flames. Nothing could have survived that inferno. Nothing except the two of them, lying in the mud and rain while the storm raged on and the fire turned the night orange. Ethan became aware of screaming. Maya. He lifted his head and saw his daughter running across the field, illuminated by the flames. Behind her, other figures were emerging, neighbors, drawn by the explosion. Tom Patterson from the next farm over, Kelly Morrison from down the road, all staring in shock at the destruction that had fallen from the sky. "Dad!" Maya reached them and dropped to her knees. Tears streamed down her face. I thought you were... I'm okay." Ethan's voice came out as a rasp. His throat felt like he'd swallowed broken glass. "I'm okay, baby, but she needs help." Tom Patterson appeared at his shoulder, cell phone in hand. "Ambulance is on the way. Jesus, Ethan, how did you—" "Get blankets," Ethan interrupted. "She's going into shock." He was going into shock too, but that could wait. He rolled off the woman and carefully checked her pulse. Still there, but weak and thready. Her eyes were closed again, and blood continued to seep from the gash on her head. Someone draped a blanket over her. Someone else wrapped one around Ethan's shoulders. Maya pressed against his side, shaking. He put an arm around her, holding her close. "It's okay," he murmured, though he wasn't sure if he was talking to Maya or himself. "It's going to be okay." In the distance, sirens began to wail. Help was coming. But as Ethan looked down at the unconscious woman in the mud, at the burning wreckage that had nearly killed them both, at his terrified daughter clinging to his side, he had the sudden, inexplicable feeling that nothing would ever be okay again. Not in the way it had been. The storm continued to rage, but the rain was finally winning its battle against the flames. Steam rose from the wreckage in thick clouds, mixing with the smoke. The sirens grew louder. And Ethan Walker, widowed mechanic and reluctant hero, had no idea that he'd just saved one of the most powerful women in the world, or that his life was about to change in ways he couldn't possibly imagine. The paramedics arrived 12 minutes after Tom's call, which was actually quick by rural Oregon standards. 2 ambulances and a fire truck bounced across the rutted farm road, their emergency lights painting the night in alternating red and white. Behind them came the sheriff's department, then more vehicles. News vans from Eugene, drawn by reports of a plane crash. Ethan sat in the mud with the woman's head in his lap, keeping her stable while Maya pressed a neighbor's clean towel against the head wound. His daughter's hands shook, but her face was set with determination, so much like her mother. "Sir, we need to get in there." A young paramedic, couldn't have been more than 25, eager face beneath his rain-soaked cap, knelt beside them with a medical kit. Ethan carefully transferred the woman to their care and stood on shaky legs. Now that the adrenaline was fading, pain arrived in a rush. His hands were cut to ribbons from the glass. His shoulder throbbed where he'd hit the ground. Burns covered his forearms, and every breath sent sharp needles through his lungs from smoke inhalation. "You need treatment too," the paramedic's partner said, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes. She was already steering Ethan toward the second ambulance. "I'm fine. Take care of her first." "There are 2 of us, honey. We can handle both." Before Ethan could protest further, Sheriff Daniels appeared, a stocky man in his 50s with a weathered face and shrewd eyes. He'd been sheriff of Canyon County for 20 years and had known Ethan since he was a kid. "Ethan Walker, what the hell were you thinking running into a burning plane?" "Wasn't much thinking involved, Jim. More reacting." The sheriff grunted. "I need a statement, but it can wait until you're patched up. Anyone else on that plane?" "The pilot. Maybe others. I only saw her." They both looked toward the wreckage. The fire was mostly out now, doused by rain and the volunteer fire department's efforts. But what remained was a twisted skeleton of metal, still too hot to approach. If anyone else had been aboard, they were beyond help. "Jesus." Sheriff Daniels pulled off his hat and ran a hand through his thinning gray hair. "FAA's sending investigators from Portland. FBI too, probably. Plane that size, they'll want to know what happened." Ethan let the female paramedic lead him to the ambulance, while Maya stuck to his side like a burr. She wouldn't let go of his hand, and he didn't try to make her. She'd already lost one parent. Tonight, she'd come terrifyingly close to losing another. As the paramedic cleaned and bandaged his cuts, Ethan watched the controlled chaos unfolding across his farm. More emergency vehicles, more officials, news crews setting up lights and cameras at the property line. His quiet life, already shattered by Sarah's death, was about to become a circus.
"Dad? Who do you think she is?" Maya whispered. Ethan glanced at the other ambulance, where the paramedics were loading the woman onto a stretcher. In the harsh LED lights, he could see her more clearly now. Her suit, though torn and muddy, was definitely expensive, something tailored, Italian maybe. Her watch, still somehow intact on her wrist, looked like it cost more than his truck. "I don't know, sweetheart. Someone important, probably. You saved her life." "Maybe." Ethan winced as the paramedic tightened a bandage on his palm. "Or maybe I just delayed the inevitable. She's hurt pretty bad." "Don't say that." Maya's voice was fierce. "You pulled her out of fire, Dad. You're a hero." "I'm not." He stopped. They'd had this argument before, after the Army awarded him his second Bronze Star for valor. He tried to explain that he wasn't a hero, that he'd just done what needed doing, that real heroes were the ones who didn't come home. But Maya never accepted that. To her, her father was Superman, and nothing he said would change her mind. Maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. Sheriff Daniels returned, this time with a thin man in a suit despite the rain and mud. FBI, Ethan guessed. He was right. "Mr. Walker, I'm Special Agent Morrison, FBI. I understand you pulled the survivor from the wreckage?" "Yes, sir." "Did she say anything? Anything about what happened?" Ethan thought back to those moments in the burning cabin. "She asked about the pilot, that's all." "Did you see anyone else? Any other movement in the plane?" "No, just her." Agent Morrison made notes on a waterproof pad. "The aircraft is registered to Horizon Technologies Corporation. Does that name mean anything to you?"
It did. Even here in rural Oregon, even to a mechanic who paid more attention to engine specs than tech news, the name Horizon Technologies was impossible to ignore. They were one of the biggest tech companies in the world, specializing in artificial intelligence and neural interfaces, whatever those were. Their CEO was constantly in the news, some young genius who'd revolutionized the field. "I know of them," Ethan said carefully. Agent Morrison's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. "The woman you saved, did you recognize her?" "No. Should I?" Before the agent could answer, a commotion erupted near the ambulance where the woman was being loaded. A black SUV had somehow made it past the sheriff's roadblock, and 3 people were climbing out, 2 men in suits and a woman in tactical gear, all moving with the coordinated precision of professional security. "Ma'am, you need to step back." A deputy moved to intercept them. The woman in tactical gear flashed a badge. "Private security for Horizon Technologies. That's our principal. Where are you taking her?" "Sacred Heart in Eugene," one of the paramedics called back. "But ma'am, we need to go now. She's critical." The security team exchanged rapid-fire conversation in voices too low for Ethan to hear. Then one of the suited men approached Sheriff Daniels while the other 2 climbed into the ambulance with the woman. Ethan watched it all unfold with a growing sense of surrealism. This wasn't how things worked in Millfield. Here, the biggest emergency was usually a barn fire or a tractor accident, not plane crashes, not FBI agents and corporate security teams. "Mr. Walker?" He turned to find Agent Morrison studying him with new intensity. "That woman you saved?" "That's Camille Joe, CEO of Horizon Technologies." The name hit him like a physical blow. Even Ethan, who avoided the news as much as possible, knew that name. Camille Joe, billionaire, tech genius, one of the most powerful people in the world. He'd seen her face on magazine covers at the grocery store, had heard Maya talk about her when doing school reports on successful women in STEM, and he'd just pulled her from a burning plane. "Oh," Ethan managed. "Which makes this a very high-profile situation," Agent Morrison continued. "We're going to need a detailed statement. Everything you saw, everything you heard, everything you remember about the crash and the rescue." "Okay. Not tonight. Tonight you get medical attention and rest, but tomorrow I'll need several hours of your time." The ambulance with Camille Joe pulled away, lights flashing, the 2 security personnel riding inside. The black SUV followed immediately after, and more vehicles were arriving. Horizon Technologies logos on the sides, more security personnel, what looked like a crisis management team. "Dad?" Maya's voice was small. "This is getting really big, isn't it?" "Yeah, baby, I think it is." They ended up at Sacred Heart Medical Center anyway, despite Ethan's protests. The paramedics insisted. His burns needed proper treatment, and his smoke inhalation was severe enough to warrant observation. Maya came with him, of course, and Tom Patterson drove Ethan's truck to the hospital so they'd have a way home. The ER was chaos, not just from the normal Friday night traffic, car accidents, chest pains, all the usual emergencies, but from the influx related to the plane crash. News crews had set up outside. Security personnel filled the waiting room. Hospital administrators rushed around looking stressed. And through it all, a single question dominated every conversation. How was Camille Joe? Ethan learned more about the woman he'd saved while sitting in an examination room waiting for a doctor. Maya had her phone out. Somehow she'd managed to keep it charged despite the power outage, and was reading aloud from news articles. Camille Joe, age 38, CEO and founder of Horizon Technologies, Maya read. Net worth estimated at $47 billion. Named one of Time magazine's 100 most influential people 3 years running. Known for her work in artificial intelligence and neural computer interfaces. "What's a neural computer interface?" Ethan asked. "Technology that lets human brains communicate directly with computers. They're working on treatments for paralysis, Alzheimer's, all kinds of things." Maya scrolled further. "Dad, she's amazing. She has a PhD from MIT, started her first company when she was 23, sold it for $200 million, then founded Horizon when she was 29. Ethan tried to reconcile this description with the unconscious, bleeding woman he'd carried from the wreckage. Billionaire. Genius. World changer. and he'd had her blood soaking into his shirt. A doctor finally arrived, Dr. Sarah Kim, according to her badge. She was efficient and thorough, treating his burns, checking his lungs, stitching the worst of the cuts on his hands. The whole time she kept glancing at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "You're very lucky," she said, applying a final bandage. "Smoke inhalation can cause serious long-term damage, but your lungs sound clear. The burns are second degree, but not extensive. You'll heal." "And the woman from the plane?" Dr. Kim's expression became guarded. "I can't discuss other patients." "I understand. I just—" Ethan paused, surprised by the intensity of his own concern. He didn't know Camille Joe. He'd never even heard her voice when she was fully conscious, but he'd held her life in his hands, had felt her heart beating against his chest as he carried her from the fire. "You didn't go through something like that and just walk away." "She's alive," Dr. Kim said quietly, bending the rules just a little. "That's all I can say. But Mr. Walker, you gave her a chance. Whatever happens now, you gave her that." After Dr. Kim left, Ethan and Maya were moved to a private waiting room, apparently at the request of Horizon Technologies, who'd taken over an entire wing of the hospital. They sat together on an uncomfortable couch, Maya curled against his side, both of them exhausted, but too wired to sleep. "I keep seeing it," Maya whispered. "The plane coming down, the fire. You running toward it instead of away. I'm sorry you had to see that." "I'm not." She looked up at him, her eyes, Sarah's eyes, fierce and bright. "I'm not sorry, Dad. You did something incredible tonight. You saved someone's life. That matters." Before Ethan could respond, the waiting room door opened. One of the security personnel from earlier stepped in, the woman in tactical gear. Up close, Ethan could see she was in her early 40s, with sharp features and eyes that missed nothing. "Mr. Walker? I'm Diana Chen, head of security for Ms. Joe. She's awake and asking for you." Ethan blinked. "She's awake?" "For short periods, yes. The doctors want to keep her sedated to manage the pain, but she's been adamant about speaking with you." Diana's expression softened slightly. "She's also very clear on one point. If it weren't for you, we'd be planning a funeral instead of a recovery." Maya squeezed Ethan's hand. He stood, feeling the pull of his injuries, the exhaustion weighing on his bones. "Can my daughter—" "Of course." Miss Joe specifically asked to meet her as well. They followed Diana through corridors that had been cleared of normal traffic. More security personnel stood at intervals, and Ethan noticed they were armed, concealed carry, professional-grade weapons. Whatever threat had brought down that plane, Horizon Technologies was taking no chances on a second attempt. The thought sent ice through his veins. A second attempt. He'd been so focused on the crash as an accident that he hadn't considered other possibilities. But the FBI's involvement, the intense security, the way Diana's hand never strayed far from her weapon, it all suggested something darker. They reached a private room at the end of the hallway. More security outside and inside, enough medical equipment to run a small ICU. And there, in the bed surrounded by monitors and IV lines, was Camille Joe. She looked smaller than Ethan remembered, more fragile. Bandages covered the left side of her head, and her left arm was in a cast. Bruises darkened her face, but her eyes were open and alert, fixed on the doorway with an intensity that seemed to cut through the pain medication. "Mr. Walker," she said. Her voice was hoarse but steady. "Please, come in." Ethan approached the bed, acutely aware of his own appearance. Still in his muddy, blood-stained clothes, burns and bandages visible on his arms. Maya stayed close to his side, suddenly shy in the presence of such concentrated wealth and power. "Ms. Joe, I'm glad to see you awake." "Because of you." Camille's gaze moved to Maya. "And you must be the daughter Diana told me about. What's your name?" "Maya Walker," his daughter managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maya. That's beautiful." Camille smiled, though it clearly hurt. "I understand you were very brave tonight. My dad's the brave one." "Your father is extraordinary," Camille agreed. "He ran into a burning plane to save a complete stranger. That's not bravery, that's heroism." Ethan felt heat rise in his face that had nothing to do with his burns. I just did what anyone would have done. No. Camille's voice was firm, despite its weakness. Most people would have run the other way. Most people would have called 911 and waited. You didn't. You saw someone in danger and you acted, without thought for your own safety. She paused, struggling with emotion. My pilot, Richard, did he… I'm sorry. Ethan shook his head. The cockpit took the worst of the impact. Camille closed her eyes briefly, grief flickering across her face. He had a wife, 2 kids in college, 20 years flying for Horizon. When she opened her eyes again, they were wet. This shouldn't have happened. We'd filed a flight plan, checked the weather. The plane was maintained perfectly. This shouldn't have… She broke off, and Diana stepped forward with a glass of water. Ms. Joe, you need to rest. In a moment. Camille took a sip, then fixed Ethan with that intense gaze again. Mr. Walker, Ethan, I need to ask you something important. Do you remember anything unusual about the crash, anything you heard or saw before the plane went down? Ethan thought back, replaying those frantic minutes. It was fighting the storm. The engines sounded wrong. One was on fire. But I'm not a pilot. I wouldn't know if there was something more. And after, when you were inside? You asked about Richard, the pilot. That's the only thing you said. Camille nodded slowly, processing this. The FAA will investigate, the NTSB. They'll determine what happened. Her voice carried an undercurrent of something, anger, maybe, or fear. But Ethan, I need you to know something. What you did tonight, pulling me from that wreckage. She had to stop, overcome. You gave me a second chance. Whatever happens with the investigation, whatever comes next, I owe you my life. You don't owe me anything. Yes, I do. Her intensity was startling, given her condition. And I pay my debts. Before Ethan could respond, Diana stepped in again. Ms. Joe, the doctors are insisting. You need rest. Camille looked like she wanted to argue, but exhaustion was clearly winning. Ethan, Maya, will you stay in Eugene tonight, please? The Horizon team has rooms at the Hilton downtown. Everything's taken care of. That's not necessary. It is to me. Camille's eyes were already closing. Please. Humor a woman who just cheated death. Diana will arrange everything. And just like that, she was asleep, pulled down by medication and the body's desperate need for healing. Diana shepherded them out of the room. In the hallway, she pulled out a phone and made rapid calls, her voice crisp and efficient. Within minutes, arrangements were made. Suite at the Hilton, clothing delivered to the room in their sizes, transportation waiting. This is too much, Ethan protested as they rode the elevator down. Diana gave him a look that might have been amusement. Mr. Walker, you saved the life of a woman worth $47 billion. By any calculation, a hotel room and some clothes are getting off cheap. Her expression grew more serious. But beyond the monetary value, beyond what the company owes you, Camille Joe is my friend. She's a good person in a world that doesn't always reward goodness. You brought her back from the edge tonight. There's no price on that. The black SUV was waiting at the hospital's private exit, shielded from the news crews still camped at the main entrance. As they drove through Eugene's late-night streets toward the hotel, Ethan stared out the window and tried to process the evening's surreal turns. 12 hours ago, his biggest concern had been whether he could afford a new transmission for Mrs. Henderson's Buick. Now he was being chauffeured to a luxury hotel by the security team of one of the world's richest women, a woman whose life he'd saved, whose blood he could still feel dried on his skin beneath the fresh hospital shirt they'd given him. Maya had fallen asleep against his shoulder, exhausted by fear and adrenaline crash. Ethan held her close and watched the city lights blur past and wondered what the hell happened next. He didn't have to wonder long. The Hilton suite was bigger than Ethan's farmhouse. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked downtown Eugene, leather furniture arranged in conversation areas, a kitchen that probably cost more to design than he made in a year. Maya woke up long enough to marvel at it, then disappeared into one of the bedrooms. There were 3, and crashed hard. Ethan should have done the same. His body screamed for sleep, but his mind wouldn't stop racing, replaying the crash, the fire, Camille Joe's face in that moment he'd first seen her in the burning plane. He showered, washing away the mud and blood and smoke smell, trying not to wince as hot water hit his burns. Someone had indeed delivered clothes, multiple outfits in his size, from casual to formal. He pulled on sweatpants and a t-shirt, both soft and expensive in a way he wasn't used to. The TV in the living room was tuned to CNN, volume low. He turned it on hoping for background noise to quiet his thoughts, but instead found himself watching footage of his own farm. Dramatic rescue in rural Oregon tonight, the anchor was saying, where a plane carrying tech CEO Camille Joe crashed during a severe thunderstorm. Local resident Ethan Walker, a former Army veteran, pulled Joe from the burning wreckage moments before it exploded. Walker, a widowed father raising his daughter alone, is being called a hero tonight. Ethan turned it off. He didn't want to be called a hero. Didn't want the attention or the praise. He'd just done what needed doing, like always. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. He opened it to find Diana Chen standing in the hallway, now in civilian clothes, jeans and a sweater, but still radiating that sense of controlled alertness. "Can't sleep either?" she asked. "Too much adrenaline still in my system." "Mind if I come in? I thought we should talk." Ethan stepped aside and Diana entered, moving to the windows to look out at the city. For a long moment she was quiet, and Ethan had the sense she was deciding how much to tell him. "The plane shouldn't have crashed," she finally said. "Richard Chen, the pilot, no relation, was one of the best. 20,000 flight hours, most of them on that exact aircraft. And that Gulfstream G650 is one of the safest private jets ever built." She turned to face Ethan. The odds of a catastrophic failure in those conditions, with that pilot, they're astronomical. "You think it wasn't an accident?" "I think we need to wait for the investigation." Her tone was carefully neutral. "But I also think you should know that Camille has enemies, powerful ones." Ethan felt that ice in his veins again. "What kind of enemies?" "The kind who don't like what she's building. The kind who see neural computer interfaces as a threat to their own interests." Diana moved to sit in one of the leather chairs, gesturing for Ethan to do the same. Horizon is about to launch the most advanced neural interface ever created, Project Icarus. It could revolutionize medicine, help millions of people with neurological conditions. But it could also disrupt entire industries. There are people who'd rather that didn't happen. "And you think someone tried to kill her?" "I think someone may have, and if I'm right, if this was sabotage," Diana's gaze was steady and serious, "then they might try again." The implication settled over Ethan like a weight. He'd saved Camille Joe's life, yes, but if someone had actively tried to end it, would they just accept failure and move on? Or would they see Camille's survival as unfinished business? And if they did try again, where did that leave the mechanic from Oregon who'd gotten in their way? "You're trying to figure out if you're in danger now," Diana said, reading his expression. "The honest answer is, I don't know. If this was an accident, you're a hero who'll get his 15 minutes of fame and then life returns to normal. If it wasn't," she shrugged, "then you're a complication, a witness, someone who might have seen something." "I didn't see anything useful." "You don't know what might be useful until the investigation is complete." Diana leaned forward. "Here's what I can tell you. Horizon Technologies takes care of its own. Camille takes care of people who've helped her. Whatever comes next, you and your daughter won't face it alone." It should have been reassuring. Instead, it felt like a door closing on his old life and opening on something unknown and potentially dangerous. "I should get some sleep," Ethan said, standing. "Long day tomorrow." "FBI interview in the morning, NTSB in the afternoon. Probably news media requests, though we can run interference on those if you'd like." "I would appreciate that." Diana stood as well, moving toward the door, but she paused with her hand on the knob. "Ethan, what you did tonight, running into that fire, that took more than bravery. It took someone who's decided their own life matters less than someone else's. I recognize it because I used to be the same way." Her eyes held understanding and something like concern. "Just make sure Maya doesn't lose another parent because you don't value yourself enough." Then she was gone, and Ethan was alone with his thoughts and the sleeping city beyond the windows and the growing certainty that his quiet life in Millfield, Oregon had just ended forever. He finally went to bed around 3 in the morning, lying in sheets that cost more than his weekly grocery budget, staring at the ceiling. Sleep came eventually, but it brought dreams of fire and falling planes and a woman's face in the moment between death and survival. And when he woke 5 hours later to Maya shaking his shoulder and morning light streaming through the windows, the world had changed again. "Dad," Maya said urgently, holding out her phone, "you need to see this." The screen showed a news article, and the headline made Ethan's blood run cold. Horizon Technologies CEO Camille Zhou survives plane crash. Preliminary reports suggest possible sabotage. The quiet life was definitely over, and somehow Ethan knew this was only the beginning. The FBI interview lasted 3 hours. Special Agent Morrison returned with a partner, Agent Sarah Chen, a woman in her 30s with sharp eyes and a recording device that she placed carefully on the conference table between them. They were in a private room at the Hilton, requisitioned by the Bureau for the investigation. Through the windows, Ethan could see downtown Eugene going about its Saturday morning routine, oblivious to the federal investigation unfolding in their midst. Maya waited outside with Diana, who'd arrived at 7 with breakfast and a lawyer, just in case, she'd said, though Ethan wasn't sure if that made him feel better or worse. "Let's start from the beginning," Agent Morrison said, his pen poised over a legal pad despite the recorder. "What time did you first notice the aircraft?" Ethan walked them through it again. The storm, Maya seeing the lights, the sound of the engines failing, the crash, the fire. Every detail he could remember, which seemed both too much and not enough. "When you were inside the aircraft," Agent Chen interrupted, "did you notice anything unusual? Any smells besides smoke and fuel?" "Like what?" "Accelerants, chemical odors, anything that seemed out of place for a plane crash." Ethan thought back, trying to separate the chaos of those moments into distinct sensory memories. Just smoke and burning plastic, jet fuel. I wasn't exactly cataloging smells while trying not to die. Agent Chen made a note. "Fair enough. What about the structural damage? Did anything look like it had been tampered with?" "I'm a mechanic, not an aircraft investigator. I wouldn't know what tampering looks like on a Gulf Stream." Ethan felt his patience thinning. "Look, I pulled an unconscious woman from a burning plane, that's all. I didn't conduct a forensic examination." "We understand, Mr. Walker," Agent Morrison said in a placating tone. "But you have mechanical expertise. You spent 6 years as an Army combat engineer. Your eye for detail might have caught something without you realizing it." So they'd done their homework on him. Ethan supposed he shouldn't be surprised. He tried to give them what they wanted, reaching back into those terrifying minutes for anything unusual. The way the cabin had been torn apart, the fire starting in the rear, the jammed door that he'd forced open. But it all just seemed like normal crash damage to him. Normal in the sense that planes weren't designed to hit the ground at 300 miles per hour. "Ms. Zhou mentioned the pilot when she regained consciousness," Agent Chen said. "Exact words?" "She just said the pilot, like a question, or maybe she was worried about him. Then I told her I was getting her out." "Nothing about what caused the crash? No mention of mechanical failure or—" Agent Chen paused deliberately. "Anything else?" "No, she was barely conscious. I'm not sure she even knew where she was." The agents exchanged a glance that Ethan couldn't read. They had information they weren't sharing. He could feel it in the room's tension, in the careful way they phrased their questions. "Is this sabotage?" Ethan asked bluntly. Diana Chen suggested it might be. Agent Morrison set down his pen. "The NTSB is leading the investigation into the crash's cause. We're involved because of the profile of the victim and certain circumstances surrounding Horizon Technologies." He chose his words carefully. "There have been threats against Miss Zhou in recent months, mostly online, mostly from fringe groups opposed to AI development, but some have been more specific and credible." "Credible enough to bring down a plane?" "We're exploring all possibilities," which wasn't an answer at all. They questioned him for another hour, going over the same ground repeatedly, trying to shake loose some detail he might have forgotten. But Ethan had nothing more to give them. He'd seen a plane crash. He'd pulled someone from the wreckage. End of story. Except it clearly wasn't the end. Not for the FBI, and not He was beginning to realize. For him. When they finally released him, Ethan found Maya in the hallway, curled up on a leather bench with her phone. Diana stood nearby, speaking quietly into her earpiece. She ended the call when she saw him. How'd it go? They think it was sabotage. They tell you that? They didn't have to. Ethan rubbed his face, feeling the exhaustion in his bones. He'd slept maybe 4 hours, and the burns on his arms were starting to throb despite the pain medication. What happens now? Now you have lunch with Camille. Ethan blinked. What? She's insisting. The doctors aren't happy about it, but Camille Joe doesn't take no for an answer very well. Diana's expression softened. She wants to thank you properly, and I think she needs to see that you're okay, that saving her didn't destroy you in the process. Something in Diana's tone suggested personal experience, but before Ethan could ask, Maya was at his side. Can we see her, Dad? Please? I have so many questions about neural interfaces and AI development, and let's just focus on lunch, sweetheart. They took the black SUV back to Sacred Heart Medical Center, where the media presence had somehow intensified overnight. News vans lined the streets, reporters doing stand-ups in front of the hospital entrance, cameras trained on anyone who entered or exited. Diana navigated them through a service entrance where security had set up a checkpoint. Is it always like this? Maya asked, eyes wide as they passed through metal detectors and past armed guards. Only when someone tries to kill my boss, Diana said dryly. They rode a private elevator to the 4th floor, which had been essentially locked down by Horizon's security team. More guards at the elevator bank, more at the corridor entrance, more outside Camille's room. It felt less like a hospital and more like protecting a head of state. Inside the room, Camille was sitting up in bed, looking significantly better than she had the night before. The haunted, shocked expression had been replaced by something more alert, though pain still tightened the corners of her eyes. She wore a hospital gown, but somehow made it look dignified. Her left arm remained in its cast, and bandages still covered part of her head, but she was unmistakably present, the force of personality that had built a tech empire shining through despite the injuries. Ethan. Maya. Camille's face lit up when she saw them. Please, come in. I was worried the FBI would interrogate you until dinner. Just until lunch, Ethan said, moving to the chair beside her bed. Maya hung back, suddenly shy again in the presence of such concentrated intelligence and power. Camille noticed and smiled gently. Maya, I understand you're interested in technology? Yes, ma'am. Maya's voice was barely audible. What are you working on in school right now? A science project on aerodynamics. How different wing shapes affect lift and drag. Maya's confidence grew as she talked about her passion. I built 3 model planes with different wing designs and tested them in a wind tunnel I made from a box fan and a cardboard tube. That's brilliant, Camille said, and there was no condescension in her voice, just genuine interest. Have you considered variable geometry? Wings that change shape based on conditions? Maya's eyes went wide. Like the F-14 Tomcat? Exactly. But imagine applying those principles to something smaller, a drone maybe, that could adapt its wings for maximum efficiency in different situations. Camille shifted in bed, wincing slightly. When I was your age, I was obsessed with how birds fly, how they can make these tiny adjustments to their wing shape and position to handle wind shear, updrafts, all kinds of variables. That's what led me to neural interfaces, actually, studying how the brain processes complex spatial information in real time. Ethan watched his daughter lean forward, completely captivated. He'd seen Maya excited about science before, but this was different. This was a glimpse of what she could become, what she could achieve if she had the right opportunities and mentors. And here was one of the most successful women in technology, lying in a hospital bed with a fractured arm and head trauma, taking time to encourage a 12-year-old girl from rural Oregon. Ms. Joe, Ethan started. Camille, please. She turned those intelligent eyes to him. Ms. Joe is what people call me in board meetings before they try to lowball me on acquisitions. Despite everything, Ethan smiled. Camille, you really don't need to do all this. The hotel, the lawyer, Yes, I do. Her voice was firm. Ethan, you gave me my life back. Every morning I wake up from now on is a gift you gave me. How could I not want to say thank you? You already did. Last night. That was gratitude in the moment. This is... Camille paused, searching for words. This is acknowledging that actions have consequences. You acted with extraordinary courage, and that deserves to be recognized. Not with a press conference or a medal, since Diana tells me you'd hate that, but in ways that actually matter. A knock at the door interrupted them. A hospital staffer entered with lunch. Not the usual hospital fare, but catered from somewhere expensive. Salmon, fresh vegetables, crusty bread, enough for all of them. They ate together, and Camille asked about their life in Millfield. What did Ethan fix in his shop? What was Maya's favorite subject besides science? How long had they lived on the farm? Simple questions, but Ethan had the sense she was building a picture, understanding who they were beneath the surface. Sarah, my wife, grew up on that farm, Ethan found himself saying. Her grandparents built the house in 1952. When we got married, they signed it over to us. That was 11 years ago. He glanced at Maya, who was focused on her salmon. She died 3 years back. Cancer. I'm sorry. Camille's sympathy was quiet and genuine. Losing someone you love, it changes the shape of the world. Yeah. Ethan set down his fork, appetite suddenly gone. It does. My mother died when I was 14, Camille said softly. Stroke. 1 minute she was helping me with homework, the next she was on the floor, and nothing we did could bring her back. She looked at Maya. It's the worst thing in the world, losing a parent, but you survive it, and sometimes you do more than survive. You honor them by becoming who they hoped you'd be. Maya's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. My mom wanted me to be brave, to try things even when they're scary. Then you're already honoring her. Camille reached out with her good hand, and Maya took it. And you have an incredible father who models that courage every day. The moment stretched between them, grief recognized and shared, even across the vast divide of wealth and circumstance. Ethan felt something tight in his chest loosen slightly. He'd been so focused on keeping Maya safe, on maintaining stability after Sarah's death, that he'd forgotten other people had survived similar losses. They weren't alone in their grief, even if it sometimes felt that way. Diana entered quietly, her expression apologetic. Camille, the board is insisting on a video call. They've been patient, but tell them 10 minutes. Camille sighed, then turned back to Ethan and Maya. I have to deal with corporate crisis management, keeping the stock price stable, reassuring investors that I'm not dead or incapacitated. Her tone was wry. The glamorous life of a CEO. We should go anyway, Ethan said, standing. Let you rest. Wait. Camille's voice stopped them at the door. Tomorrow the NTSB will interview you. After that, assuming the doctors clear me to leave, and I will be cleared to leave, I'd like you both to come stay at my home for a few days. Ethan shook his head. That's generous, but we need to get back to Millfield. I have a business to run. Maya has school. Your farm is a crime scene. The FBI has it cordoned off for investigation. Camille's voice was gentle but firm. Diana checked this morning. They're estimating at least a week before you can return, possibly longer. And even then, there will be cleanup, wreckage removal, soil testing for fuel contamination. Ethan felt the ground shift beneath him again. Of course, the FBI had taken over his property. Where else would they investigate the crash? But he hadn't thought through the implications, where they'd stay, how he'd work, what this meant for their life. The school's been notified that Maya will be out for the week, Camille continued. Your neighbors, Tom and Kelly, have offered to handle your pending repair jobs and take care of your animals. Diana arranged all of this morning because I asked her to. She met his eyes. Ethan, for the next week at least, you're homeless. Let me give you a place to stay. Let me help. Why? The question came out harder than Ethan intended. Why does it matter so much to you? Camille was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice carried weight. Because I almost died, and you stopped it from happening. Because I've spent 15 years building a company, but in those moments when you pulled me from the fire, none of that mattered. The money, the power, the influence, it all meant nothing. What mattered was human kindness. Human courage. She paused. That's worth more than any technology I'll ever create, and I want to honor it properly. Ethan looked at Maya, who was watching him with hope in her eyes. His practical side said to refuse, to find a motel somewhere and maintain their independence. But the truth was, they had nowhere to go. His insurance would eventually cover expenses, but that took time, and Maya deserved better than a cheap motel while their life was in limbo. Okay, he finally said. A few days, until we can go home. Camille's smile was radiant despite her injuries. Thank you. My house in San Francisco, you'll like it. It has a workshop that puts most professional facilities to shame. And Maya, there's a library with more books on science and technology than you could read in a year. San Francisco? Maya's voice squeaked with excitement. Is that a problem? Camille asked. No, ma'am. I've just never been to a big city before. Then you're in for an adventure. Camille settled back against her pillows, exhaustion finally showing through. Diana will arrange everything. And Maya? Bring your aerodynamics project. I'd love to see it. They left Camille to her board meeting and her rest. In the hallway, Diana was already on her phone, coordinating logistics with the efficiency of a military operation. Private jet to San Francisco, once the FAA cleared Camille to fly again, which would probably be Monday. Doctors making house calls, security detail, everything managed, everything handled. This is overwhelming, Ethan muttered to Diana as they walked to the elevator. Get used to it. This is how Camille operates. She sees a problem and she solves it, usually before you realize the problem exists. Diana pressed the elevator button. But Ethan? She means what she says. She doesn't do anything out of obligation. If she's inviting you into her home, it's because she genuinely wants you there. The elevator arrived and they rode down in silence. Ethan's mind was racing, trying to process how completely his life had shifted in less than 24 hours. Yesterday morning, his biggest concern had been a carburetor rebuild. Now he was heading to San Francisco as the house guest of a billionaire he'd saved from a plane crash that might have been sabotage. It was absurd. It was surreal. It was happening anyway. Maya grabbed his hand as they exited the hospital through the service entrance, avoiding the media circus out front. Dad, is this crazy? This whole thing? Yeah, baby, it's pretty crazy. But good crazy, right? Like adventure crazy, not disaster crazy? Ethan looked down at his daughter, so much hope in her face, so much excitement mixing with uncertainty. Sarah would have loved this, he thought. She'd always wanted to show Maya the world beyond Millfield, to expose her to possibilities and opportunities. Cancer had stolen that chance. Maybe, in some strange way, this was the universe's apology. Good crazy, he said. Adventure crazy. Maya squeezed his hand and they climbed into the SUV for the ride back to the hotel. The rest of Saturday passed in a blur of interviews and arrangements. The NTSB questioned Ethan separately from the FBI, asking similar questions but with more technical focus. What had the engine sounded like? What was the angle of descent? Could he estimate the speed? Ethan answered as best he could, but he was a mechanic, not an aviation expert. They seemed disappointed he couldn't provide more concrete data. Sunday morning, Diana arrived with news. Camille had been cleared to travel and they'd leave for San Francisco that afternoon. The media had somehow gotten wind of Ethan's identity, and reporters were camped outside the hotel. Horizon's security team would escort them to a private airport, where a different Gulfstream, this one with twice the security measures and a pilot Diana personally vouched for, waited to take them south. What about our stuff at the farm? Maya asked. Already packed and loaded, Diana said. We had a team retrieve essentials yesterday while the FBI processed the scene. Your clothes, your school materials, your father's tools. Everything's waiting in San Francisco. Ethan started to protest the invasion of privacy, then stopped. What was the point? His life wasn't private anymore. The moment he'd run into that burning plane, he'd stepped onto a stage he didn't understand, with rules he didn't know. All he could do was hold on to Maya and try not to drown. The flight to San Francisco took 2 hours. Ethan spent most of it watching Maya's face pressed to the window, her expression full of wonder as they flew over California's landscape. Camille sat across from them, her arm in a sling, a laptop balanced on her knees despite Diana's disapproving looks. She worked steadily, occasionally wincing when movement jarred her injuries, but never slowing down. "Don't you ever rest?" Ethan asked. Camille glanced up, a slight smile on her lips. "I'm resting right now. You should see me when I'm actually working." "This isn't working? This is answering emails. Working is when I'm in the lab with my team, designing the neural pathways for the next generation interface, or in the boardroom, fighting off hostile acquisition attempts, or at conferences, trying to convince people that direct brain-computer communication isn't science fiction." She closed the laptop. "This is just maintenance." Sounds exhausting. It is, but it's also exhilarating. Camille's eyes lit up in a way that reminded Ethan of Maya talking about aerodynamics. "Do you know what it's like to build something that could change the world? To wake up every morning knowing that your work might help a paralyzed person walk again, or restore speech to someone who's lost it, or give independence back to people with degenerative conditions. That's what your neural interfaces do? That's what they will do. We're close, Ethan. So close." She touched her bandaged head unconsciously. "Project Icarus, the system we're launching next month. It's revolutionary. Full neural mapping, bidirectional communication, adaptation to individual brain patterns. It's everything I've worked toward for the last decade." "And someone tried to stop you." Camille's expression darkened. "Maybe. The investigation isn't conclusive yet. But yes, I have enemies who'd prefer Icarus never reaches the market." "Why?" "Because it threatens their interests. Pharmaceutical companies who make billions from medications that Icarus could replace. Tech competitors who've invested in inferior technologies. Even some governments worried about the implications of brain-computer interfaces." She looked out the window at the clouds. Innovation always threatens someone. The more revolutionary the change, the more desperate the resistance. "That's a lot of pressure." "It is. But I have good people around me. Diana, my grandfather, who keeps me grounded. My research team who believe in the work as much as I do." Camille turned back to him. "And now I have you." "I'm just a mechanic who happened to be in the right place." "You're more than that. You're proof that courage still exists in the world, that people will risk everything to save a stranger." Her voice grew soft. "I need that reminder right now. After the crash, after realizing someone might have actively tried to kill me, I need to remember that there's good in people. You gave me that." Before Ethan could respond, Maya called out from her window seat. "Dad, I can see the Golden Gate Bridge." They all looked, and there it was. The iconic orange span stretching across the bay, San Francisco rising beyond in layers of fog and sunlight. Ethan had seen pictures, of course, but the reality was breathtaking. "Welcome to my city," Camille said. They landed at a private airport south of the city, where another convoy of black SUVs waited. The drive through San Francisco reminded Ethan of descending into another world, from the industrial sprawl near the airport to the Victorian houses painted in bright colors, from the crowded commercial districts to the quiet, wealthy neighborhoods where homes cost more than entire towns in rural Oregon. Camille's house occupied a full block in Pacific Heights, a modern architectural masterpiece of glass and steel that somehow fit seamlessly into the historic neighborhood. A gate opened as they approached, closing immediately behind them, and Ethan understood that this was more than a home. It was a fortress, designed to keep Camille Jo safe from a world that might want to harm her. Inside, the house was both stunning and surprisingly warm. High ceilings and open spaces, but filled with art and books and personal touches that made it feel lived in rather than sterile. A grand piano occupied one corner of the living room. Family photos lined the hallway. In the kitchen, herbs grew in a window garden. "Your rooms are upstairs," Camille said, leading them to a sweeping staircase. "Maya, yours has a view of the bay. Ethan, yours is next door with an adjoining bathroom. Everything you need should be there, but if not, just ask." The rooms were incredible. Maya's decorated in blues and whites with that promised bay view, Ethan's more masculine with dark woods and leather furniture. Their belongings had indeed been unpacked and arranged, everything in its place as if they'd always lived here. "This is too much," Ethan said again, feeling like a broken record. "It's a guest room." Camille's tone was patient. "I have 6 of them. You're using 2. The tragedy would be leaving them empty." "Camille." She held up her good hand. "Let me show you something." They followed her, slowly because her injuries clearly pained her, to the back of the house, through a door and down a short hallway to what she'd called a workshop. Ethan stepped inside and stopped. It was a mechanic's paradise. Every tool he could imagine, organized with military precision. Lifts, diagnostic equipment, a full machine shop in one corner. Classic cars in various states of restoration. A 1965 Mustang, a 1970 Chevelle, what looked like a vintage Porsche. "You rebuild cars," Ethan said, stunned. "It's my meditation. When the pressure of running Horizon gets too intense, I come down here and work with my hands. No algorithms, no board meetings, no stock prices, just metal and engines and the satisfaction of making something broken work again." Camille ran her good hand along the Mustang's fender. "My grandfather taught me. He was a mechanic in the Air Force, then ran his own shop for 40 years. Everything I know about building things, not just cars but anything, I learned from him." "Where is he now?" "Upstairs, probably napping. He lives here with me. Has since my grandmother passed 5 years ago." Camille smiled. "You'll meet him at dinner. Fair warning, he's going to love you. Former military, works with his hands, saved his granddaughter's life. You're basically his ideal human." Maya had wandered to the Mustang and was peering under the hood. "What year is this?" "The body style is first generation, but some of these engine components look newer." "Very good eye," Camille said. "It's a 65, but I'm doing a resto mod, keeping the classic exterior, upgrading the mechanics. Modern fuel injection, improved suspension, contemporary safety features. Best of both worlds." "That's so cool." Maya's enthusiasm was palpable. "Could you teach me? I mean, if we're staying here for a few days, could I help?" "I'd like that. We can work on it together." Camille looked at Ethan. "Both of you. I could use the help, and honestly, I've been going crazy not being able to use my left hand properly." This was the trap, Ethan realized. Not a cruel trap, but a kind one. Camille was giving them space in her life, showing them possibilities, making them feel not like charity cases, but like guests with something to contribute. It was brilliant and generous and terrifying because it made him want to stay, want to be part of this world that was so far removed from his own. "We'll help," he heard himself say, "for as long as we're here." "Good." Camille's smile was warm. "Now, let's get you both settled in. Dinner's at 7, and I promise my grandfather's cooking is worth staying for." They spent the afternoon exploring the house, or rather, Maya explored while Ethan tried to process the surreal turn his life had taken. The library Camille had mentioned took up an entire room, floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with books on everything from quantum physics to art history. A home gym occupied another space, equipped better than most commercial facilities. Outside, a garden defied the San Francisco fog, full of vegetables and flowers that someone, probably Camille, tended with care. At 7, they gathered in the dining room. Camille's grandfather, Robert Joe, turned out to be a spry 78-year-old with mischievous eyes and the weathered hands of someone who'd spent a lifetime working with tools. He greeted Ethan with a firm handshake and Maya with a hug. "So you're the hero," Robert said, studying Ethan intently. "I'm really not." "Save it. I know false modesty when I hear it." Robert's grin was infectious. "You ran into a burning plane. That's either heroism or stupidity, and since you got both of you out alive, I'm going with heroism." Dinner was indeed incredible. Robert had made dumplings from scratch, along with stir-fried vegetables and ginger chicken that filled the house with amazing smells. They ate together around a table that probably cost more than Ethan's truck, but the atmosphere was surprisingly normal. Robert told stories about his Air Force days. Maya talked about her science project. Camille asked Ethan about the most interesting repair jobs he'd handled. It felt, against all logic, like family. After dinner, Diana arrived with updates on the investigation. They moved to Camille's study for the conversation, and Ethan could tell from Diana's expression that the news wasn't good. "The NTSB found evidence of tampering," Diana said without preamble. "Someone accessed the plane's systems the night before the flight and installed malware in the flight computer. It was designed to trigger during specific conditions, in this case, severe weather and high altitude. It overrode the pilot's controls and sent the plane into a dive." The room went silent. Camille's face had gone pale, and she gripped the edge of her desk with her good hand. "So it was murder," she said quietly. "Attempted murder, but yes." Diana's expression was grim. "The FBI is treating this as a federal case. They're investigating everyone who had access to the plane, everyone with a grudge against Horizon, everyone with the technical skills to pull this off." "Who knew I was flying that night?" Camille asked. "Your executive team, the board, flight crew, security, maybe 24 people total, all of them vetted." Diana paused. "But flight plans are filed with the FAA. Anyone with the right access could have known." Ethan's mind was racing. Someone had tried to kill Camille Joe, and they'd nearly succeeded. Only luck, or fate, or whatever force had put his farm in that plane's path, had prevented it. "What does this mean for us?" he asked. "For Maya and me?" "It means you're witnesses in a federal murder investigation," Diana said. "It also means that whoever did this knows you saved Camille. Your name and face have been all over the news. If they consider you a threat, they might come after us." Ethan felt ice in his stomach. "We don't know that," Camille interjected quickly. "You didn't see anything that would identify the saboteur. You're not a threat to them." "Unless they think I am." Ethan looked at Maya, who'd gone very quiet. "We should leave. Go somewhere else, somewhere safe." "You're safe here," Camille said firmly. "This house has security that most government facilities would envy. Diana's team, plus the FBI's protection. No one is getting to you or Maya, I promise." "You can't promise that." "I can, and I do." Camille's intensity was almost frightening. "Ethan, you saved my life at great personal risk. Do you really think I'd let anything happen to you or your daughter now?" They stared at each other across the desk, and Ethan saw the steel beneath Camille's polished exterior. This was the woman who'd built a multi-billion-dollar company, who'd fought off hostile takeovers and corporate espionage, who'd survived assassination attempts and refused to back down. And she was promising to protect them. "Okay," Ethan said finally. "We stay. For now. But if this gets worse..." "If it gets worse, we'll reassess. Together." Camille's expression softened. "I'm not your enemy, Ethan. I'm your ally. Let me act like one." Diana left to coordinate with the FBI, and Robert took Maya to the library to show her his collection of vintage aviation magazines. Alone with Camille, Ethan felt the weight of the day settling on his shoulders. "I'm sorry," Camille said quietly. "I never meant to drag you into this." "You didn't drag me anywhere. I chose to run into that plane. Still, if I'd known what would follow, the investigation, the media attention, the potential danger..." "You'd have what? Crashed somewhere else?" Despite everything, Ethan smiled slightly. "I don't regret saving you, Camille. I just wish it hadn't put Maya at risk." "She's safe. I'll make sure of it." Camille moved to the window, looking out at the city lights. "When I woke up in that burning plane, when I realized what was happening, I thought about all the things I'd never do. I'd never see Project Icarus launch, never reconcile with my father, never have children of my own. All these futures, just gone." She turned back to him. "You gave those futures back to me. However complicated this gets, that's worth everything." Ethan didn't know what to say to that. Instead, he stood and moved to join her at the window. The city spread out below them, millions of lives being lived, millions of stories unfolding. Somewhere out there was the person who'd tried to kill Camille Joe. Somewhere out there was the truth about what happened to that plane. And somehow, Ethan Walker had become part of this story, whether he wanted to be or not. "We should get some rest," Camille said. "Tomorrow's going to be intense. The FBI wants to coordinate our testimonies, and I have a board meeting to convince everyone that I'm still capable of running Horizon." "Are you?" Ethan asked. "Still capable, I mean. After what happened?" Camille was quiet for a long moment. "I have to be. Too many people are depending on me. The company, yes, but also everyone who's waiting for Icarus, everyone who could benefit from what we've built." She met his eyes. "I don't have the luxury of falling apart. Not yet." It was the most vulnerable she'd been since he'd met her, and Ethan recognized the feeling. After Sarah died, he'd had the same thought. Maya needed him, so he couldn't break. He had to keep functioning, keep providing,
Keep being a father even when grief threatened to destroy him. For what it's worth, he said, I think you're stronger than you know. I hope you're right. Camille smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. Good night, Ethan. Thank you for everything. He found Maya in the library, curled up in an armchair with Robert, both of them poring over a magazine article about P-51 Mustangs.
His daughter looked up when he entered, and the happiness on her face made his chest ache.
Dad, Mr. Joe flew these in Korea. He's telling me about dogfights and tactical maneuvers and everything. It's Robert, sweetheart. Mr. Joe makes me sound ancient. The old man's eyes twinkled. Your daughter's got a sharp mind, Ethan, asking all the right questions. She gets that from her mother. Smart woman, then. You're lucky. I was. Ethan felt the familiar pang of loss. Come on, Maya. Time for bed. She protested, but Robert backed him up. They said goodnights and headed upstairs where Maya's room waited with its bay view and comfortable bed. She changed into pajamas while Ethan checked the windows, locked, secure, with what looked like reinforced glass and security sensors. Dad? Maya's voice was small. Are we really in danger? Ethan sat on the edge of her bed, choosing his words carefully. I don't think so.
The person who caused the crash. They were after Camille, not us. We're just witnesses. But if they think we saw something, we're safe here. Diana's team is the best, and the FBI is protecting us too. He smoothed her hair back from her face. I won't let anything happen to you, baby. I promise. I know. Maya's eyes were Sarah's eyes, brown and trusting. This is all so different from home. Yeah, it is. But also kind of amazing. Camille is incredible, and Robert's so nice, and this house is like something from a movie. She looked up at him. Is it okay to like it here, even though we're here because something bad happened? Ethan thought about it. I think so. Bad circumstances don't erase good things. Your mom taught me that. During the cancer? Yeah. Even when she was sick, she'd find things to be grateful for. A good day, a sunset, your laugh. His voice thickened. She'd say that joy doesn't wait for perfect circumstances. You take it where you find it. Maya was quiet, processing this. Then, Mom would have liked Camille. I think you're right. He kissed her forehead and turned off the light, leaving the door cracked open the way she liked. In his own room, Ethan stood at the window looking out at San Francisco, at this city that was now temporarily home, and tried to understand the path his life had taken. 24 hours ago, everything had been simple. Hard, but simple. Now he was in a billionaire's house, involved in a federal investigation, and somehow responsible for the fact that one of the world's most brilliant minds was still alive. His phone buzzed. A text from Sheriff Daniels back in Millfield. The media had descended on the town, bothering his neighbors, trying to find people who'd talk about Ethan Walker, the local hero. Tom Patterson had apparently chased 3 reporters off his property with a shotgun. Not loaded, but they didn't know that. Ethan smiled despite himself. That was home. People who protected each other, who circled the wagons against outsiders, who measured worth by character rather than bank accounts. But this place, Camille's world, it had its own kind of community. Robert's warmth, Diana's fierce loyalty, Camille's determination to repay what she saw as a debt. Different from Millfield, but no less real. He'd have to find a way to navigate both worlds now. The question was whether he could do it without losing himself, or Maya, in the process. Outside, fog rolled in from the bay, shrouding the city in white, and Ethan finally went to bed, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new questions, and quite possibly new dangers. But for tonight, they were safe. For tonight, that was enough. Monday morning arrived with fog so thick that Ethan couldn't see the bay from his window. He woke early, old habits from the army still dictating his internal clock, and found himself alone in the silent house. Even the staff, and he'd learned yesterday that Camille employed a small team who managed the household, hadn't arrived yet. He made coffee in the enormous kitchen, feeling out of place among the professional-grade appliances and imported tile. The machine alone probably cost more than his monthly mortgage payment. But the coffee was good, strong and dark, and he took it out to the back patio where morning light was starting to burn through the fog. You're up early." Ethan turned to find Robert Joe shuffling out in slippers and a bathrobe, his own mug of coffee in hand. The old man settled into a chair with a contented sigh. "Military habits die hard," Ethan said. "Tell me about it." "I've been waking up at 0500 for 60 years, give or take." Robert sipped his coffee. "Can't sleep in, even when I try." They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the fog recede and reveal the city below. Ethan could hear the distant sound of traffic, the muted horn of a ship in the bay, the urban symphony so different from Millfield's rural quiet. "She reminds me of her grandmother," Robert said suddenly. "Camille. Same drive, same brilliance, same tendency to work herself into the ground because she can't stand the thought of leaving anything unfinished." "That what killed her grandmother?" "Heart attack at 62. She was working on a community center project, putting in 18-hour days because she wanted it done right." Robert's voice carried old grief. Camille was devastated, blamed herself for not seeing the signs, for not forcing May to slow down. "That's a heavy burden for a kid." "She was 29, hardly a kid, but yeah, heavy enough." Robert looked at Ethan. "She started Horizon Technologies 6 months later. Threw herself into building something revolutionary, something that would honor May's memory. Been at it ever since." Ethan thought about his own response to Sarah's death, shutting down emotionally, focusing on Maya and the farm, avoiding anything that might crack the careful control he'd built around his grief. Camille had done the opposite, channeling her loss into creation, into purpose. "The crash must have been terrifying for you," Ethan said, "almost losing her too." "Worst night of my life. Diana called me from the hospital, said there'd been an accident, but Camille was alive. I didn't believe it until I saw her with my own eyes." Robert's hand shook slightly as he raised his coffee cup. "Then I heard how you pulled her out, how you ran into that fire without hesitation, and I thought there are still good people in the world, still heroes, even if they don't want the title." I know, you're not a hero. You've said it about a dozen times." Robert's smile was gentle but firm. "But Ethan, whether you accept it or not, you did something extraordinary. You gave me back my granddaughter. You gave the world back one of its brightest minds. That matters, son. It matters more than you know." Before Ethan could respond, his phone buzzed with a text from Diana. The FBI wanted them at Horizon Technologies headquarters at 10 for a security briefing. Camille had a board meeting at 11, and she wanted Ethan and Maya there to meet the executive team afterward. "Big day ahead," Robert observed, reading Ethan's expression. "Don't let them intimidate you. Boardrooms are just like anywhere else, full of people trying to look more important than they are." "Somehow I don't think Camille's boardroom is like anywhere else." "Fair point," Robert chuckled. "But the principle stands. Just be yourself. That's clearly working so far." Maya emerged around 8, eyes wide with excitement despite the circumstances. She'd never been to a major tech company, never seen the kind of innovation that happened at places like Horizon. Over breakfast, prepared by Robert with the same care he'd shown at dinner, she peppered Camille with questions about neural interfaces, artificial intelligence, the future of human-computer integration. Camille answered each question thoughtfully, never talking down to Maya, treating her like a fellow scientist rather than a curious child. Ethan watched the interaction and felt something shift in his chest. This was what Maya needed. Mentorship from someone who understood her passion, who could show her what was possible if she pursued her dreams. The drive to Horizon Technologies took them through downtown San Francisco and into the south of Market District, where new construction rose alongside old warehouses. The Horizon building was impossible to miss, a sleek tower of glass and steel that seemed to reach into the fog itself, the company logo blazing from its peak. Security was immediately apparent. Guards at the entrance, metal detectors, ID scanners, and a system that Diana explained used facial recognition and behavioral analysis to identify threats. It felt less like entering an office building and more like accessing a military installation. "Is it always like this?" Ethan asked as they rode an elevator to the 40th floor. "Since the crash, yes. Before it was thorough but not quite this intense." Diana's expression was grim. "We're not taking chances anymore." The elevator opened onto an executive floor that was all modern design and expensive materials. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered stunning views of the city. Art that Ethan suspected was original and priceless hung on the walls. And everywhere, the quiet hum of intense work, people moving with purpose, conversations held in urgent tones. They were ushered into a conference room where Special Agent Morrison and Agent Chen waited, along with two other FBI personnel and a woman who introduced herself as Special Agent Rivera, head of the San Francisco field office. "Thank you for coming," Rivera said, her tone professional but not unfriendly. She was in her 50s with sharp eyes and the bearing of someone who'd seen everything. "We wanted to brief you on the investigation's progress and discuss security protocols moving forward." For the next hour, they reviewed what the FBI had learned. The malware that brought down the plane was sophisticated, suggesting either a highly skilled individual or a well-funded organization. The FBI was investigating several leads, including competitors in the tech industry, foreign intelligence agencies interested in Horizon's neural interface technology, and radical groups opposed to AI development. "We've also identified a specific threat stream that concerns us," Rivera said, pulling up a document on the conference room screen. "Victor Lang, CEO of Neurodyne Technologies." Ethan watched Camille's expression harden at the name. "Victor and I have history," Camille said tightly. "We were graduate students together at MIT, brilliant researcher, but he cut corners, falsified data when results didn't support his theories. I reported him, and he was expelled. He's hated me ever since. He's also tried repeatedly to acquire Horizon Technologies," Agent Morrison added. 3 hostile takeover attempts in the last 5 years, all unsuccessful. And his company, Neurodyne, has been developing competing neural interface technology that, according to our experts, is significantly inferior to Horizon's Project Icarus. "You think he sabotaged the plane?" Ethan asked. "We think he had motive and means," Rivera said carefully. "Neurodyne's product launch is scheduled for 2 weeks after Horizon's. If Camille had died in that crash, Horizon would have been thrown into chaos, possibly forced to delay Icarus indefinitely. That would give Neurodyne a massive market advantage." "But you don't have proof," Camille said. "Not yet, but we're working on it." Rivera turned to Ethan and Maya. "Which brings us to you. Mr. Walker, we believe you and your daughter are safe from direct threats. You didn't witness anything that could identify the saboteur, and attacking you would only draw more attention to the case. However, we can't entirely rule out the possibility that someone might try to use you to get to Miss Joe." The ice was back in Ethan's stomach. "Use us how?" "As leverage, as a way to manipulate her actions or decisions." Rivera's gaze was steady. "We don't want to alarm you unnecessarily, but awareness is your best protection. Be vigilant about your surroundings. Report anything unusual, and trust Ms. Joe's security team. They're among the best in the private sector." Diana nodded from her position by the door. "We've already implemented additional protocols. No one gets near Ethan or Maya without clearance. Their movements are monitored and protected, and this building is now essentially a fortress." Maya, who'd been quiet throughout the briefing, finally spoke up. "What about when we go home? Back to Oregon?" The adults exchanged glances, and Ethan realized they'd all been avoiding that question. "We'll discuss that when the time comes," Rivera said diplomatically. "For now, you're safest here." After the FBI left, Diana escorted them to a different conference room where Camille's executive team was gathering for the board meeting. Ethan and Maya waited in an adjacent lounge, and through the glass wall, Ethan could see the meeting unfold. Camille stood at the head of a massive table, her arms still in a sling but her presence commanding. Around her sat a dozen people in expensive suits, and even without hearing the conversation, Ethan could sense the tension. Some were clearly concerned about Camille's ability to lead after the crash. Others were arguing about something, probably security costs, or the impact on the stock price, or any of 100 corporate concerns that Ethan couldn't begin to understand. But Camille held her ground. He watched her present data on a screen, pointing with her good hand, her expression intense and focused. Whatever doubts the board members had, she was systematically dismantling them. "She's amazing," Maya whispered, also watching. "Yeah, she really is." The meeting lasted 2 hours. When it finally ended, Camille emerged looking exhausted but triumphant. "They've approved moving forward with the Icarus launch. Same timeline, same plan. No delays." Is that wise? Ethan asked. Given what happened? It's necessary. If we show weakness now, Victor Lang and every other competitor will smell blood in the water. We have to demonstrate that Horizon is strong, that I'm strong, that nothing will stop us from delivering what we've promised. Camille's jaw was set with determination. Besides, Project Icarus represents years of work by hundreds of people. I won't let some saboteur steal that from them. Diana appeared at her elbow. The press is requesting a statement. They want to know about your condition, your plans, your response to the crash. Set up a press conference for tomorrow. I'll address everything then. Camille turned to Ethan. I want you there. Not on stage, but present. The media knows you saved my life. Having you visible will reinforce that I'm here because of heroism, not luck. I don't want to be part of a media circus. I know, and I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. Camille's expression was earnest. Ethan, public perception matters in my world. How the crash is portrayed, how my survival is understood. It affects stock prices, investor confidence, employee morale. I need people to see that Horizon is resilient, that we overcome adversity. Your presence helps tell that story. Ethan wanted to refuse, wanted to take Maya and disappear back to Oregon, back to the simple life of fixing engines and avoiding attention. But he looked at Camille's face, bruised and bandaged, exhaustion in every line, and saw someone fighting not just for herself, but for hundreds of employees, thousands of investors, millions of potential patients who might benefit from her technology. Okay, he said. But Maya stays out of the spotlight. Agreed. Diana will keep her backstage. Camille's gratitude was evident. Thank you. The rest of Monday passed in a blur of introductions and information. Camille took them on a tour of Horizon headquarters, showing them the research labs where Project Icarus was being perfected, the fabrication facilities where neural interfaces were manufactured, the testing areas where volunteers were already using early versions of the technology to control computers with their thoughts alone. Maya was transfixed, asking detailed questions about signal processing and neural mapping that made the research scientists smile. One of them, Dr. Sarah Park, spent 20 minutes explaining the mathematics behind brain-computer communication, drawing diagrams on a whiteboard while Maya absorbed every word. Your daughter has a real aptitude for this, Dr. Park told Ethan afterward. Has she considered studying neuroscience? She's 12. I'm not sure she's considered much beyond getting through middle school. Well, when she does start considering, Dr. Park handed him a business card. Horizon has internship programs for promising students, high school, college, even earlier for exceptional cases. Maya would be welcome. Ethan pocketed the card, unsure how to feel. Part of him was proud that his daughter impressed a PhD scientist at one of the world's leading tech companies. Another part felt the future accelerating toward them too fast, Maya's childhood slipping away into possibilities he couldn't quite grasp. That evening, they had dinner at a restaurant overlooking the bay, a place where Camille was clearly a regular, where the staff greeted her warmly and seemed genuinely glad she'd survived the crash. The owner came out personally to comp their meal and express his relief. You're loved here, Ethan observed. San Francisco has been good to me. When I started Horizon, I was just another tech entrepreneur with big ideas and limited capital. The community supported me. Investors who took a chance, partners who believed in the vision, neighbors who showed up when we opened our first office. Camille looked out at the darkening bay. I don't forget that. Success doesn't happen in isolation. After dinner, they returned to Camille's house to find Victor Lang's face on the evening news. The report was playing in the living room where Robert had the TV on. Diana immediately reached for the remote to turn up the volume. Neurodyne CEO Victor Lang issued a statement today expressing relief at Camille Zhou's survival, while also suggesting that Horizon Technologies' focus on aggressive expansion may have compromised safety protocols. That son of a bitch, Diana muttered. On screen, Victor Lang stood outside Neurodyne's headquarters, looking appropriately somber. He was in his late 30s, conventionally handsome, with the polished appearance of someone who spent a lot of time managing his image. Our thoughts are with Camille and everyone at Horizon during this difficult time, Lang was saying. However, this tragedy raises important questions about corporate responsibility in the tech sector. When companies prioritize innovation over safety, when they rush products to market without adequate testing, accidents become inevitable. I hope this serves as a wake-up call for the entire industry. He's trying to spin this, Camille said, her voice tight with anger. Trying to make it look like Horizon was negligent, like we somehow caused our own plane to crash. The FBI will prove it was sabotage, Ethan said. Maybe, but by the time they do, the narrative will be set. Victor's already planting seeds of doubt. Was Horizon cutting corners? Was I pushing too hard? Did my ambition cause Richard's death? Camille's hands were shaking. This is exactly what he wants, to destroy my credibility while appearing sympathetic. Diana was already on her phone, presumably calling the PR team. Robert moved to Camille's side, putting a steadying hand on her shoulder. And Maya, Ethan noticed, was watching everything with wide eyes, learning in real time how power and manipulation worked in the world she'd entered. "We fight back," Camille said, her voice growing stronger. "Tomorrow's press conference. I don't just talk about the crash. I talk about Victor Lang's history of unethical behavior. I talk about his failed acquisition attempts. I make it clear that someone tried to kill me. And while I can't name suspects publicly, people can draw their own conclusions." "That's risky," Diana warned. "If you accuse him without proof." "I won't accuse. I'll imply. There's a difference." Camille's eyes were hard. "Victor wants to play games? Fine. But he forgets who he's playing with." The transformation was startling. Gone was the grateful woman who'd thanked Ethan for saving her life, replaced by someone calculating and fierce. This was the CEO who'd built a multi-billion-dollar empire, who'd outmaneuvered competitors and survived corporate warfare. This was the woman who didn't lose. And Ethan realized, with something between admiration and unease, that he was seeing only a fraction of who Camille Joe really was. That night, Ethan lay in bed scrolling through news articles on his phone. The crash was still dominating headlines, but now Victor Lang's statement was getting equal coverage. Some reporters were indeed questioning Horizon's safety practices. Others were defending Camille, pointing out that all evidence suggested external sabotage. The narrative was splitting, becoming politicized, turning into another front in the endless culture war that seemed to consume every major news story. His phone rang, Sheriff Daniels calling from Oregon. "Ethan, we've got a situation," the sheriff said without preamble. "Someone broke into your workshop last night." Ethan sat up. "What?" Tom heard the noise around 2 a.m. and went over with his shotgun. By the time he got there, whoever it was had run off. But they'd gone through your files, your computer, made a real mess. "Did they take anything?" "Hard to say. Tom's not sure what was there to begin with, but Ethan—" The sheriff paused. "This wasn't a random burglary. They ignored the tools, the equipment, all the valuable stuff. They were looking for something specific." The ice in Ethan's stomach turned to lead. Someone had broken into his property, searching for something. What? Information about the crash, evidence he might have collected? Or were they trying to intimidate him, send a message that nowhere was safe? "I'm notifying the FBI," Daniels continued. "They've already got agents up here working the crash site. They'll want to process this as connected." "Jim, can you ask Tom to keep an eye on the place? Make sure no one comes back?" "Already on it. Half the county's watching your farm now. Anyone tries anything, they'll have a dozen deer rifles pointed at them." The sheriff's voice softened. "How you holding up down there in the big city?" "I'm not sure anymore." "Yeah, I figured." Daniels sighed. "Look, I know this is way beyond anything we deal with in Millfield, but you've got people here who care about you, Ethan. You need anything, and I mean anything, you call." After they hung up, Ethan sat in the darkness and tried to make sense of it all. The crash investigation, Victor Lang's media manipulation, the break-in at his workshop, Maya's excitement about opportunities she'd never imagined, Camille's determination to push forward despite threats to her life. It was too much, too fast, too far from the quiet existence he'd built after Sarah died. A soft knock on his door interrupted his spiraling thoughts. "Come in." Maya entered, looking small in her pajamas. "I heard you on the phone. Someone broke into our house?" No point in lying to her. She was too smart, and she'd find out anyway. "The workshop. They didn't take anything valuable." "What were they looking for?" "I don't know, baby. Maya climbed onto the bed beside him, curling into his side the way she had when she was little.
Dad, I'm scared. I know this is exciting, meeting Camille and seeing all this amazing technology, but what if the people who crashed the plane come after us? Hey, Ethan pulled her close. Diana's team is the best. The FBI is protecting us, and I promise you, I will not let anything happen to you, whatever it takes. But what if, no, what ifs? We deal with what's real, what's in front of us. Everything else is just worry wearing a disguise. It was something Sarah used to say, and hearing the words come out of his mouth made his chest ache. Your mom always said that courage isn't being unafraid.
It's being afraid and doing the right thing anyway. Is staying here the right thing? Ethan thought about it. They could run, find a motel somewhere, hide until the investigation concluded, hope that anonymity kept them safe. Or they could stay, help Camille fight back against whoever had tried to kill her, stand their ground despite the fear. I think so, he finally said. I think the right thing is standing with people who need us. And right now, Camille needs us. Not just because I saved her life, but because we represent something she's fighting for. Good people doing the right thing, even when it's hard. Maya was quiet for a long moment. Then, Mom would like her. Camille, I mean. Yeah, I think she would. They sat together in the darkness, father and daughter, far from home, but not alone. Eventually, Maya went back to her own room, and Ethan finally managed to fall into an uneasy sleep filled with dreams of fire and breaking glass and voices in the dark asking questions he couldn't answer. Tuesday morning brought the press conference. Camille was up early, working with her PR team to craft the perfect message. Diana was coordinating security for the event, which would be held at Horizon headquarters and attended by dozens of media outlets. And Ethan was trying to figure out how to fade into the background while still being visible enough to serve Camille's purposes. Just stand near the back, Diana advised as they prepared. Let the cameras catch you occasionally. You don't need to say anything, your presence is enough. The press conference was held in Horizon's main auditorium, a space that could accommodate 200 people, and was currently filled with reporters, cameras, and the aggressive energy of media professionals smelling a major story. Ethan stood backstage with Diana while Camille waited in the wings, reviewing her notes one last time. You ready for this? Ethan asked her. Camille looked up, and he was struck again by her intensity. Despite the injuries, despite the exhaustion, she radiated determination. I've been preparing for this moment my whole career, not the plane crash specifically, but the crisis that would define everything. This is it. She set down her notes. Time to show them who I am. She walked onto the stage to a barrage of camera flashes and shouted questions. Diana nodded to Ethan, and he moved to a position just off stage where he'd be visible but not central. From there, he watched Camille take command of the room. Good morning. Thank you all for coming. Her voice was strong, amplified by the excellent sound system. 5 days ago, I experienced what should have been the last moments of my life. The plane I was traveling in crashed during a severe storm in rural Oregon. My pilot, Richard Chen, died in that crash. He was a good man, a skilled aviator, and a friend. His loss is devastating to everyone who knew him. She paused, letting the weight of grief settle over the room. The reporters, for once, were silent. I survived because of the extraordinary courage of Ethan Walker, a mechanic and veteran from Millfield, Oregon, who ran into a burning plane to pull me from the wreckage. He risked his life for a complete stranger, and I owe him everything. Ethan is here today, though he's asked to stay out of the spotlight. I want him to know publicly how grateful I am, how grateful everyone at Horizon is. Cameras swiveled toward Ethan. He kept his expression neutral, uncomfortable with the attention but understanding its necessity. Camille continued, her tone shifting. The NTSB and FBI are investigating the crash. I cannot discuss details of an ongoing investigation, but I can tell you this. Preliminary findings suggest the crash was not accidental. Someone deliberately sabotaged my plane, intending to kill me and possibly destroy Horizon Technologies. The room erupted. Questions flew from every direction, reporters shouting over each other. Camille waited for quiet, and her commanding presence eventually brought it. I know there's been speculation about Horizon's safety practices, Suggestions that we somehow brought this on ourselves through negligence or recklessness. Let me be absolutely clear, those suggestions are false. They are also convenient for our competitors who benefit from sowing doubt about Horizon's leadership and operations. She was doing it, not directly accusing Victor Lang, but making sure everyone understood where to look. Ethan watched the reporters' faces and saw them making the connection. I will not name suspects. That's for law enforcement to determine. But I will say this. Horizon Technologies has competitors who have tried repeatedly to acquire us, to steal our technology, to undermine our work. Some of those competitors have a history of unethical behavior. And now, someone has escalated from corporate espionage to attempted murder. The implications hung in the air, heavy and obvious. Every reporter in the room knew about Victor Lang's history with Camille, his failed acquisition attempts, his competing product launch. She didn't need to say his name. They'd do it for her. Despite this attack, Horizon will not be intimidated. Project Icarus will launch as scheduled next month. Our neural interface technology will help millions of people with neurological conditions reclaim their independence and their lives. That mission is bigger than any individual, bigger than any threat. We will not stop. We will not slow down. We will deliver on our promise to change the world. The conviction in her voice was absolute. Ethan felt it resonating through the auditorium, saw it land with the reporters, understood that this moment would define how the story was told going forward. Camille wasn't a victim. She was a warrior. And Horizon wasn't in retreat. It was advancing. The question and answer session that followed was intense. Reporters pressed for details about the investigation, for specific accusations against Victor Lang, for information about Ethan's role. Camille handled each query with precision, giving enough to satisfy their hunger for story while protecting the investigation's integrity. When someone asked about Ethan specifically, whether he was being compensated for the rescue, whether he was involved in Horizon's operations, Camille's answer was pitch perfect. Ethan Walker is my friend and my guest. He saved my life, and I'm doing everything I can to ensure he and his daughter are safe and supported during this difficult time. Beyond that, his privacy is his own. I would ask the media to respect that he's a private citizen who performed an extraordinary act of heroism and deserves to return to his normal life when this is over. It was a graceful way of saying back off, and most of the reporters seemed to understand. A few kept pushing, but Diana was already signaling that the press conference was ending. Backstage afterward, Camille practically collapsed into a chair. The adrenaline that had sustained her through the performance was crashing, leaving her pale and shaking. "You did great," Diana said, handing her water. "That'll dominate the news cycle and shift the narrative exactly where we want it." "Victor's going to respond," Camille said. "Probably within the hour. He'll deny everything, claim I'm making baseless accusations. Let him. You didn't accuse him. You just laid out facts and let people draw conclusions." Diana's smile was sharp. "He denies it. He looks guilty. He stays quiet. He looks guilty. There's no good move for him now." Ethan watched this exchange and felt increasingly out of his depth. This was high-stakes corporate warfare, media manipulation, billion-dollar reputations being shaped in real time. He fixed engines, he raised his daughter. He didn't belong in this world of calculated public statements and strategic implications. But he was here anyway, drawn in by a single act of courage that had seemed so simple in the moment. Someone needed help, so he helped them. Now that simple act had become the fulcrum on which entire narratives balanced. "Ethan?" Camille's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "You okay?" "Just processing." "I know this is overwhelming. I'm sorry." "Stop apologizing," he interrupted. "You've done nothing wrong. You're fighting for your company, your technology, your life. I get that. He struggled for words. "I need some air." Diana escorted him to a private balcony where he could breathe without cameras watching. The fog had cleared, revealing San Francisco in brilliant sunlight. From 40 stories up, the city looked manageable, comprehensible. But Ethan knew that was an illusion. Down there were millions of individual stories, millions of motivations, any one of which could intersect with his in ways he couldn't predict. His phone rang. Agent Rivera. "Mr. Walker, we've processed the break-in at your property. The intruder left fingerprints that match someone in our database, Marcus Chen, a private investigator based in Portland with known connections to corporate espionage cases. Who hired him? That's what we're trying to determine. He's not talking, and his lawyer is stonewalling. But Mr. Walker, this confirms that someone is actively investigating you, trying to find out what you know about the crash. You need to remain vigilant. After the call ended, Ethan stood on the balcony and watched the city move below him. Somewhere down there was Victor Lang, probably watching the press conference, planning his next move. Somewhere was the person who'd hired Marcus Chen to break into his workshop. Somewhere were all the threads of this conspiracy, connecting in ways he couldn't see. And somehow, he was supposed to keep Maya safe through all of it. Diana found him 20 minutes later. Camille wants to show you something, in her private lab. They took a secure elevator down to the building's sub-basement, where Horizon's most sensitive research was conducted. The security here was even more intense. Biometric scanners, armed guards, multiple checkpoints. This was where Project Icarus was being perfected. Camille was waiting in a clean room, wearing a lab coat over her business attire. Around her, technicians worked at stations filled with equipment Ethan couldn't begin to identify. But in the center of the room, displayed like a work of art, was the neural interface itself. It looked deceptively simple, a thin band of flexible material embedded with what appeared to be microscopic circuitry. But as Camille lifted it carefully, Ethan could see the sophistication in its design. "This is Icarus," she said softly. 15 years of research, 7 years of development, $300 million in investment, and more importantly, the hope of every person who's lost mobility, speech, or cognitive function to neurological disease. She carried it to a demonstration station where a volunteer, a young man in a wheelchair, waited. With practiced care, Camille placed the interface on his head, adjusted it, then stepped back. "David, whenever you're ready." The young man closed his eyes, concentrating. On a screen in front of him, a cursor began to move, not controlled by his hands, but by his thoughts alone. It traced letters, spelling out words. "This changes everything." "David has ALS," Camille explained. "He's lost the ability to use his hands, to speak clearly. But with Icarus, his brain can communicate directly with computers. He can write, create, connect with the world. We're still refining the technology, but in a year, 2 years, this will be available to thousands of people like David." Ethan watched the young man's face, the concentration, the joy, the tears streaming down his cheeks as he controlled the computer with nothing but thought. And he understood finally what was at stake in this fight. Not just money or corporate dominance, but human dignity, human potential. "This is why you won't back down," he said to Camille. "This is why I can't back down. David and thousands like him are depending on me. If Victor Lang or anyone else thinks they can stop this with threats and sabotage," her voice hardened, "they have no idea who they're dealing with." They spent an hour in the lab, Camille explaining the technology while Maya watched with wide-eyed fascination. Dr. Park was there, delighted to continue her mentorship, showing Maya the neural mapping software and letting her experiment with the interface's training protocols. Watching his daughter engage with cutting-edge neuroscience, seeing her confidence grow as she grasped complex concepts, Ethan felt the future opening before her in ways he'd never imagined. Maybe that was Camille's real gift, not the wealth or the opportunities, but the expansion of what seemed possible. They returned to Camille's house that evening to find Victor Lang's response dominating the news. He'd held his own press conference, denying any involvement in the crash, expressing hurt that Camille would suggest such a thing, and promising to cooperate fully with the investigation. But his denials felt hollow, defensive, and the media wasn't buying it. The narrative had shifted. Now the story was about corporate warfare turned deadly, about Victor Lang's suspicious timing, about the rivalry between two former colleagues turned bitter enemies. Camille had won the first battle of public opinion, but as Robert observed over dinner, public opinion doesn't convict criminals, evidence does. And until the FBI can prove Victor was involved, he's just a suspect in a very complicated case. "The proof exists," Camille said with confidence. "It's just a matter of finding it." That night, Ethan lay awake thinking about proof and patterns, about connections that existed but remained hidden. Someone had sabotaged the plane. Someone had hired a private investigator to search his workshop. Someone wanted Camille dead and was willing to escalate to make it happen. The question was whether they'd try again. And if they did, whether anyone could stop them in time. His phone buzzed with a text from Diana. Security detail is being doubled. FBI considers the threat level elevated. Stay alert. Ethan got out of bed and checked on Maya, finding her asleep with one of Robert's aviation magazines on her chest. She looked peaceful, innocent, unaware of the danger swirling around them. He adjusted her blanket, kissed her forehead, and returned to his own room. Through the window, San Francisco glittered in the darkness, beautiful and dangerous and full of secrets. Somewhere out there was the truth about what happened to that plane. Somewhere was the person responsible for Richard Chen's death and Camille's near murder. And somehow, Ethan Walker from Millfield, Oregon, had become part of the hunt to find them. The call came at 3 in the morning. Ethan was already half awake, unable to fully sleep with the weight of everything pressing down on him, when his phone lit up with Diana's number. He answered before the second ring, heart already racing. "We have a situation," Diana said, her voice tight with controlled urgency. Victor Lang's head of security was just arrested trying to access Horizon's server room. He had equipment designed to extract data and plant malware. Ethan sat up, fully alert now. Does Camille know? She's the one who caught him. She couldn't sleep either, went to the office to work, and her security system flagged an unauthorized access attempt. By the time our team responded, she'd already confronted him herself. Diana's tone carried equal parts admiration and frustration. The woman has a fractured arm and head trauma, but she still managed to delay him long enough for backup to arrive. Is she hurt? Bruised ego more than anything. She's furious, at Lang, at his security chief, at herself for not anticipating this move. A pause. The FBI is there now. They want to talk to her, and they want you there too. Why me? Because this connects to the plane crash. If Lang was willing to send someone into Horizon to steal data tonight, he was capable of sabotaging that Gulf Stream. They think your presence might rattle him during questioning, a reminder of what his actions cost. Ethan dressed quickly and checked on Maya, who was still sleeping soundly. Robert appeared in the hallway, also awake despite the hour. "I heard," the old man said. "I'll stay with Maya. You go do what needs doing." The drive to Horizon headquarters at 3:30 in the morning was surreal. San Francisco's streets were mostly empty, just occasional taxis and delivery trucks making their rounds. The city felt different at this hour, quieter, more honest, stripped of its daytime pretenses. Horizon's building blazed with light, and the ground floor was crowded with FBI agents, police officers, and Diana's security team. In the middle of it all stood Camille, her hair disheveled and her sling slightly askew, but her eyes burning with vindicated fury. "He sent someone into my building," she said when she saw Ethan, her voice shaking with barely controlled rage. "Not just to steal data, that happens, it's part of corporate warfare, but to plant malware. The same kind of malware that brought down my plane." Agent Rivera emerged from the server room, her expression grim. "We're analyzing the equipment now, but preliminary assessment confirms Ms. Zhou's statement. The malware signature matches what we found in the Gulfstream's flight computer." "So Victor Lang did it," Ethan said. "Victor Lang's head of security did it tonight. Whether Lang ordered the plane sabotage is still being investigated." Rivera turned to Camille. "But this gives us enough for a warrant. We're bringing Lang in for questioning within the hour." Watching it unfold, Ethan felt a strange mixture of relief and unease. Relief that the person responsible might finally face justice. Unease because corporate criminals with billion-dollar resources rarely went down easily, and the escalation tonight suggested Lang was getting desperate. Desperate people did dangerous things. Camille insisted on being present when the FBI arrested Victor Lang, so they all caravanned to Neurodyne's headquarters in South San Francisco. Dawn was just breaking as they arrived, turning the sky pink and gold. It should have been beautiful, but the moment felt ominous, like watching storm clouds gather. Neurodyne's building was smaller than Horizon's, but equally modern, all glass and steel and expensive architecture. Security tried to stop the FBI at the entrance, but federal warrants override private security. Within minutes, they were in the executive suite, where Victor Lang was apparently sleeping on a couch in his office. Ethan hung back with Diana while Agent Rivera and her team entered. Through the office's glass walls, he watched Lang wake up, confusion giving way to alarm as he registered the FBI presence. Rivera was reading him his rights, and Lang was reaching for his phone, probably calling his lawyer, when his eyes landed on Camille standing in the doorway. The look that passed between them was electric with hatred and history. These were two people who'd once worked side by side, who'd shared a passion for neural technology, who'd been destroyed by betrayal and rebuilt as enemies. And now one of them had apparently tried to murder the other. "You can't prove anything," Lang said, his voice carrying through the glass. "This is harassment based on a business rivalry. We have your head of security in custody with equipment matching the sabotage signature from Ms. Zhou's plane," Rivera said calmly. "We have evidence of corporate espionage, attempted data theft, and now attempted murder. Your cooperation would be appreciated, Mr. Lang." "I want my lawyer." "Of course. But Mr. Lang, you should know, we're also executing warrants on your home, your vehicle, and your personal electronics. If there's evidence connecting you to the plane crash, we will find it." They led Lang away in handcuffs, and Ethan saw the moment reality crash down on him. The arrogance drained from his face, replaced by fear. Whatever he'd thought he could get away with, whatever safety his wealth and position had promised, was evaporating in the cold light of federal prosecution. Camille watched him go, her expression unreadable. When he was finally out of sight, she turned to Ethan. "It's not over. Even if they prove he sabotaged the plane, even if he goes to prison, the damage he's done can't be undone. Richard is still dead. My company's reputation is still damaged. The launch is still at risk." "But you're alive," Ethan said. "That's not nothing." "No, it's everything." Her eyes were wet. "Thanks to you." They returned to Camille's house as the city woke up around them. The news was already reporting Victor Lang's arrest, and Horizon's stock price was climbing as investors interpreted the development as vindication for Camille's leadership. By the time they walked through the door, Robert had breakfast ready and Maya was awake, demanding to know what had happened. Ethan gave her the edited version. Victor Lang had been arrested. The person who crashed the plane might face justice. They were safer now than they'd been 24 hours ago. Maya processed this with the seriousness of someone older than her years, and Ethan was reminded again how much she'd had to grow up after Sarah died. "Does this mean we can go home soon?" Maya asked. The question hung in the air, complicated and loaded. Technically, yes. With Lang in custody and the immediate threat neutralized, they could return to Oregon. The FBI had finished processing the crash site. Tom Patterson had reported that the cleanup crews had removed most of the wreckage. Life could theoretically return to normal. But Ethan found himself hesitating, and the look Camille gave him suggested she was hoping he'd hesitate. "Let's give it a few more days," he said. "Make sure everything's really settled." Maya's face fell slightly. She missed home, missed her friends, missed the familiar comfort of their farm. But she nodded acceptance, trusting his judgment even when it disappointed her. After breakfast, while Maya was in the library with Robert, Camille asked Ethan to join her in the workshop. They descended to the basement garage where her collection of classic cars waited in various states of restoration. The Mustang they'd discussed days ago sat on a lift, its engine partially disassembled. "I need to work with my hands," Camille said, moving to the workbench. "Need to do something concrete and fixable after all this abstract chaos." Ethan understood completely. He'd spent countless hours after Sarah's death in his own workshop, finding solace in the straightforward logic of mechanical problems. Engines didn't lie. They didn't have hidden motives. They either worked or they didn't, and you fixed them with patience and skill. They worked in comfortable silence for a while, Camille directing while Ethan did the heavy lifting her injuries prevented. She knew her way around an engine better than most professional mechanics, and he found himself impressed by her technical knowledge. "My grandfather taught me everything," she said when he mentioned it. "After my mother died, I spent every weekend in his shop. It was the only place I felt safe, surrounded by tools and projects, problems that had solutions if you just worked hard enough to find them. That's how I felt after Sarah," Ethan admitted. "The farm, the workshop, they became my refuge, places where I could control something, fix something, when everything else felt broken beyond repair." Camille looked up from the carburetor she was examining. "Do you ever feel like you're hiding? Like you've built such a good refuge that leaving it feels impossible?" "Every day. That's why this whole thing has been so hard for you. Not just the danger or the media attention, but being forced out of your safe place into a world you didn't choose. She set down the carburetor. I'm sorry about that. I know you didn't ask for any of this. I didn't ask to lose Sarah either. Life doesn't care much about what we ask for. Ethan wiped grease from his hands. But I learned something after she died. You can hide for a while, but eventually you have to decide if you're going to live again or just exist. Maya needs me to live, not just exist. What does living look like for you? Ethan thought about it. I'm not sure anymore. Before the crash, it was simple. Raise Maya, run my business, get through each day. Now, he gestured around the workshop, at the house above them, at the life Camille had built. Now I've seen what's possible, what Maya could become if she has the right opportunities. And I don't know how to give her that in Millfield. You don't have to figure it out today, Camille said gently. The offer stands, though. Horizon has a practical applications division that designs neural interfaces for industrial and mechanical use, assembly line optimization, vehicle control systems, advanced manufacturing. It needs someone who understands how technology translates to real-world conditions, someone with mechanical expertise and practical problem-solving skills. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you a possibility, a way forward that doesn't require choosing between your old life and Maya's future. Camille met his eyes. Think about it. No pressure, no timeline, just think about it. Before Ethan could respond, Diana appeared at the workshop door, her expression urgent. Turn on the news. Victor Lang just made bail. They rushed upstairs to find Robert and Maya already watching the television, where a reporter stood outside the federal courthouse. Behind her, Victor Lang was descending the steps, his lawyer at his side, looking defiant rather than defeated. Despite the severity of the charges, Lang's attorney successfully argued that he poses no flight risk and has deep ties to the community, the reporter was saying. Bail was set at $50 million, which Lang posted immediately. He's now free pending trial, though he'll be under house arrest with electronic monitoring. That's bullshit, Diana muttered. He should be in a cell. Camille's face had gone pale. He's out. He's actually out. Under house arrest, Ethan said, though he felt his own unease rising. With FBI monitoring, he can't do anything. He doesn't need to do anything himself. He has money, resources, people who'll do what he wants. Camille's hands were shaking. This isn't over. It's not even close to over. Agent Rivera called within minutes, her voice tight with frustration. I know you're concerned about Lang's release. For what it's worth, we fought against bail, but his lawyers are good, and the judge determined he wasn't an immediate threat given the monitoring conditions. Not an immediate threat? Camille's voice rose. He tried to kill me once already. We can't prove that yet. We have evidence of corporate espionage and data theft. The plane sabotage connection is still circumstantial. Rivera sighed. I'm sorry, Ms. Joe. I know this isn't the outcome you wanted, but I promise we're building the strongest case possible. After the call ended, Camille paced her living room like a caged animal. Robert tried to calm her, but she was beyond calming, running on fear and fury, and the adrenaline of knowing her would-be killer was free. I need to move up the launch, she said suddenly. Project Icarus. If we launch now before the trial, before Lang can interfere further, we prove that Horizon is strong, that nothing can stop us. That's insane, Diana said flatly. You're still recovering from major trauma. Your arm isn't healed. You need rest, not more stress. I need to win. If Lang wanted to kill me to stop Icarus, the best revenge is making sure Icarus succeeds despite him. Camille's eyes were fierce. Call the team. Tell them we're moving the launch to next week. Camille, next week, Diana. Make it happen. Diana looked at Ethan as if expecting him to talk sense into Camille, but Ethan understood what was driving her. After Sarah died, he'd thrown himself into work with the same desperate energy, trying to outrun grief and fear through sheer productivity. It hadn't been healthy, but it had kept him functional when everything else wanted to collapse. Okay, Diana finally said. I'll make it happen. But you're going to rest between now and then. Doctor's orders, Camille. You push too hard and you'll break. The next week passed in a blur of preparation. Camille worked 16-hour days despite everyone's protests, coordinating with her team to accelerate the launch timeline. Press releases went out. Invitations were sent to media. investors, medical professionals, potential patients. The launch event would be held at Horizon headquarters, with live demonstrations of Project Icarus and testimonials from volunteers who'd been using the technology in trials. Maya spent the week shadowing Dr. Park, learning about neural mapping and signal processing. Ethan watched his daughter absorb knowledge like a sponge, saw her confidence growing, saw the scientist she could become if given the chance. And he found himself seriously considering Camille's job offer. Could they make a life here? Could he leave Oregon, leave the farm that held so many memories of Sarah, and start over in this city of fog and innovation? Could he work for Horizon Technologies, designing practical applications for neural interfaces, being part of something bigger than himself? The questions haunted him, but he kept pushing them aside. First, they needed to get through the launch. Then he could think about the future. 3 days before the event, Agent Rivera requested another meeting. They gathered in Camille's study, Camille, Diana, Ethan, and the agent, for an update on the investigation. "We've been analyzing Lang's electronics, and we found something interesting," Rivera said. "Encrypted communications between Lang and someone using the handle Project Override. The encryption is sophisticated, but our tech team is working on cracking it." "What did the communications say?" Camille asked. "We don't know yet, but the timing is significant. They started 6 months ago, right around when Lang's third acquisition attempt failed, and they continued right up until the night before your plane crashed." "So he was planning this for months," Ethan said. "It appears so. But here's the concerning part. The last message from Project Override was sent yesterday, after Lang made bail." Rivera's expression was grave. "Whatever they're planning, it's not finished." The room went cold. Camille stood frozen, processing this new threat. Diana was already on her phone, presumably increasing security protocols, and Ethan felt the familiar weight of danger settling back onto his shoulders. "What was the message?" Camille asked quietly. Rivera hesitated, then decided they deserved to know. It said, "Plan B proceeds as discussed. Icarus must not launch." In the silence that followed, Ethan understood that Victor Lang wasn't just fighting a legal battle anymore. He was planning another attack, another attempt to stop Camille and destroy everything she'd built, and this time he knew they'd be watching for obvious moves. "We're canceling the launch," Diana said immediately. "No," Camille's voice was steel. "We're not giving him that satisfaction. Camille, be reasonable." "I'm being completely reasonable. This is exactly what Lang wants, to scare us into backing down, into delaying, into showing weakness. If we cancel now, he wins even without doing anything." Camille turned to Agent Rivera. "What's the FBI's recommendation?" "Officially, cancel or postpone until we've neutralized the threat." Rivera paused. "Unofficially? If you're determined to proceed, we can provide security. Plainclothes agents throughout the venue, monitoring all access points, ready to respond to any incident." "Then that's what we'll do," Camille said. "The launch happens as scheduled. We show the world that Horizon Technologies cannot be intimidated." They spent the next 2 days turning Horizon headquarters into a fortress. Security checkpoints multiplied. Every attendee would pass through metal detectors and biometric scanners. FBI agents would be positioned throughout the building. Diana's team would monitor all electronic systems for signs of tampering. And through it all, Camille worked on her presentation, perfecting every word, every slide, every demonstration. She was running on determination and coffee, her injuries still visible but her spirit unbreakable. The night before the launch, Ethan found her alone in the auditorium, staring at the stage where tomorrow she'd reveal the culmination of 15 years of work. She looked exhausted, vulnerable, more human than he'd seen her since the crash. "Are you scared?" he asked, sitting beside her. "Terrified," she admitted. "Not of Lang, not of whatever plan B he's cooked up, but of failing, of getting this close and somehow not being good enough, not smart enough, not prepared enough." She turned to him. "What if Icarus doesn't work as promised? What if I've been so focused on beating Lang that I've lost sight of the actual technology?" "Have you?" "I don't know. I don't think so. But doubt is a hell of a thing, Ethan. It whispers that everything you've built is one mistake away from collapse." Ethan thought about the farm, about the life he'd built after the army, about how Sarah's death had made him doubt everything, whether he was a good enough father, whether he could keep going, whether anything mattered anymore. And about how slowly he'd learned that doubt was just fear wearing a mask. "You know what I think," he said. "I think you're the most prepared person I've ever met. I think Project Icarus works because you've spent 15 years making sure it works. And I think tomorrow you're going to show the world something extraordinary." "You sound awfully confident for someone who fixes carburetors for a living." "Carburetors are complicated. People underestimate them." He smiled. "But I've watched you this past week. I've seen how your team respects you, how Robert believes in you, how you kept going even when someone literally tried to kill you. That's not someone who fails, Camille. That's someone who wins." She leaned against his shoulder, a gesture of trust and exhaustion. "Thank you for being here, for not running away when this all got crazy." "Where else would I be?" "Oregon, your farm, your normal life." "Normal's overrated," Ethan said, surprising himself. "Maya's thriving here. Robert's teaching her things I never could. Dr. Park sees something special in her. And me," he paused, putting words to feelings he'd been avoiding. "I feel useful again, like I'm part of something that matters." Camille lifted her head to look at him. "Does that mean you're considering the job offer?" "I'm considering a lot of things I didn't think were possible 2 weeks ago." They sat together in the empty auditorium, two people who'd been thrown together by catastrophe and were somehow building something that looked like friendship, maybe something more. Tomorrow would bring whatever threats Victor Lang had planned. Tomorrow would test whether Project Icarus lived up to its promise. Tomorrow would determine the future of Horizon Technologies, and possibly the future of neural interface technology itself. But tonight, they had this moment of quiet before the storm. And for both of them, that was enough. The morning of the launch dawned clear and bright, San Francisco at its most beautiful. Ethan woke early to find Maya already dressed and pacing nervously. "What if something goes wrong?" she asked. "What if Victor Lang really does have a plan B?" "Then we'll deal with it," Ethan said with more confidence than he felt. "That's what we do, Maya. We face what comes, and we deal with it." They arrived at Horizon headquarters to find it transformed. The auditorium had been set up for 200 guests, with additional streaming for thousands more watching online. Medical equipment for the demonstrations was being tested and retested. Camille was backstage with her team, running through the presentation one final time. And everywhere, visible and invisible, was security. FBI agents in suits mixed with invited guests. Diana's team monitored every system. Police presence outside the building was heavy enough to deter any conventional attack. Yet Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The security was obvious, which meant Lang would have planned for it. If he was really orchestrating Plan B, he'd have anticipated exactly this level of protection. So what had they missed? At 9:30, guests began arriving. Ethan recognized several faces from the news: tech journalists, venture capitalists, medical researchers. Maya was with Robert in a secured viewing area, watching on monitors while staying safely away from the main auditorium. Diana was coordinating security from a command center she'd established in a conference room. And Camille was preparing to walk onto that stage and change the world. 10 o'clock arrived. The lights dimmed. A hush fell over the audience as Camille walked out, her arm now free of the sling, though Ethan could see the careful way she moved. She wore a dark suit that somehow made her look both professional and approachable. And when she spoke, her voice carried absolute confidence. "Good morning. Thank you all for being here on this historic day. For 15 years, Horizon Technologies has pursued a single vision: to create technology that doesn't just assist human capability, but enhances it. Today, we make that vision real." The presentation unfolded flawlessly. Camille explained the science behind neural interfaces in terms even non-experts could understand. She showed videos of test subjects using their minds to control computers, to operate robotic limbs, to communicate despite disabilities that had previously left them isolated. And then she brought out David, the young man with ALS who Ethan had met in the lab. David wore the Icarus interface, and as the audience watched in awed silence, he used only his thoughts to type a message that appeared on the giant screen behind him. "For years, ALS has been stealing my voice, my movement, my independence. Today, technology gives it all back. This is not science fiction. This is science fact. This is hope. The auditorium erupted in applause. Ethan, watching from the wings, felt tears prick his eyes. This was what Camille had been fighting for, not corporate dominance or personal victory, but this moment of a young man reclaiming his life through technology. Camille continued, demonstrating additional applications. An artist with Parkinson's creating digital paintings despite tremors that prevented physical painting. A stroke survivor relearning to speak through neural pathways, the interface helped rebuild. Story after story of human resilience enhanced by human innovation. She was nearing the end of her presentation when Diana's voice crackled in Ethan's earpiece. She'd insisted he wear one for security coordination. "We have a problem. The building's environmental systems just received an unauthorized command. Someone's trying to override the HVAC controls." Ethan's blood ran cold. The HVAC system, that's how you'd attack a building full of people without obviously attacking. Pump in carbon monoxide, or disable oxygen circulation, or introduce some other airborne threat. "Shut it down," he whispered urgently into his microphone. "We're trying. The override is sophisticated, coming from inside our network. It's the same malware signature as the plane crash." On stage, Camille was wrapping up her presentation, oblivious to the crisis unfolding. The audience was enraptured, hanging on her every word. And somewhere in Horizon Systems, Victor Lang's Plan B was executing. "Get everyone out," Ethan said. "Fire alarm, evacuation, whatever it takes." "If we evacuate now, it'll look like Horizon Systems aren't secure. It'll undermine everything Camille just presented. Better that than people getting hurt." Diana must have agreed because moments later, fire alarms began blaring throughout the building. The audience startled, confused, looking to Camille for guidance. And Camille, professional to the core, immediately took control. "Ladies and gentlemen, please proceed calmly to the exits. This is a precautionary measure. Our security team will guide you." The evacuation was orderly, FBI agents and Diana's team efficiently moving people toward exits. Ethan ran backstage to find Camille. "It's Lang," he said. "He's attacking through the building systems." Camille's face went white, then flushed with rage. "He's trying to sabotage the launch. Make it look like our technology isn't secure, like we can't even protect our own building. We need to get you out." "No." That steel was back in her voice. "We need to stop it. Where's the override coming from?" Diana appeared, slightly out of breath. "Third floor server room. The malware is embedded in our environmental control systems. Same signature as what Lang's security chief tried to plant last week." "Can we isolate it?" "Working on it, but Camille, you need to evacuate. If this building becomes a crime scene, it's already a crime scene. Lang's made sure of that." Camille was already moving toward the stairwell. "But I'm not letting him win. Not again." Ethan followed her, along with 2 FBI agents who'd been assigned as her personal protection. They climbed to the 3rd floor, where the server room hummed with banks of equipment and blinking lights. Horizon's IT team was frantically working to isolate the malware, but it was clearly proving difficult. "Talk to me," Camille said, approaching the lead technician. "It's replicating faster than we can contain it. Every time we shut down one infected system, it jumps to another. Whoever designed this knew our architecture intimately." Camille studied the screens, her mind clearly racing through possibilities. Then her eyes widened. "It's not trying to poison us or hurt anyone directly. It's trying to corrupt our data. All the Project Icarus research, all our proprietary algorithms. If the malware reaches the main research servers, it'll destroy everything." "Can we physically disconnect the servers?" Ethan asked. "Not without potentially losing data that hasn't been backed up to off-site storage. We'd lose months of work." Camille moved to a workstation, her good hand flying over the keyboard. "But I can lock down the research partition manually, cut it off from the infected network." "Ms. Joe, that's not safe," one of the FBI agents warned. "If the malware detects what you're doing, it might escalate. Let it escalate. I'm not losing 15 years of work to Victor Lang's revenge fantasy." Camille's fingers moved with practiced speed, entering commands that meant nothing to Ethan but clearly made sense to the IT team. For 5 agonizing minutes, they watched her work, isolating systems, rerouting data flows, essentially performing digital surgery on Horizon's network while the malware fought to spread. It was like watching a chess match played at lightning speed, each move countered, each strategy adapted in real time.
Finally, Camille leaned back from the keyboard. Got it. Research servers are isolated and secure. The malware is contained to non-critical systems. We can purge it without losing anything important. The IT team erupted in relieved cheers. The FBI agents were already calling in the successful containment, and Diana was coordinating with the evacuation teams to allow people back into the building. But Camille just sat there staring at the screens, her hands shaking with delayed adrenaline. He tried again, she said quietly. Even after being arrested, even under house arrest, Victor found a way to attack. And he almost succeeded. Ethan put a hand on her shoulder. But he didn't. You stopped him, Camille. Again. For how long? How many times can I keep fighting this before I miss something, before he finds a vulnerability I didn't anticipate? She looked up at him, and for the first time since he'd met her, he saw genuine fear in her eyes. What if next time people get hurt? What if my determination to not back down costs someone their life? That's on Lang, not you. You're not responsible for his choices. But I'm responsible for the people who work here, who trust me, who believe in Horizon's mission. If something happens to them because I refuse to delay the launch... Her voice broke. I couldn't live with that, Ethan. The FBI spent the rest of the day processing the crime scene, documenting the malware attack, building their case against Victor Lang. His electronic monitoring had him at home during the attack, but the evidence clearly showed the malware was his work, or at least commissioned by him. It was another piece of the puzzle, another nail in the coffin of his defense, but the launch itself was in shambles. Half the invited guests had left after the evacuation. The live stream had been cut off when the fire alarm sounded. Social media was already buzzing with speculation about what had gone wrong at Horizon Technologies' big reveal. Camille addressed the remaining audience and media in the late afternoon, standing in front of Horizon headquarters with Victor Lang's latest attack fresh in everyone's mind. Today, someone tried to sabotage our launch and destroy years of research, she said, her voice steady despite everything. They failed. Project Icarus is safe, our data is secure, and no one was harmed. But this attack demonstrates something important. Transformative technology will always face resistance from those who benefit from the status quo. She paused, meeting the camera lenses directly. Victor Lang thought he could stop progress with sabotage and intimidation. He was wrong. Horizon Technologies will launch Project Icarus as planned, and we will continue our mission to enhance human capability through neural interface technology. No amount of corporate warfare will change that. The conviction in her voice was absolute, and watching her, Ethan understood why people followed her, believed in her, invested their careers in her vision. Camille Jo didn't just lead, she inspired. And despite everything Lang had thrown at her, despite plane crashes and building attacks and constant threats, she refused to surrender. That evening, back at Camille's house, they gathered in the living room, Camille, Ethan, Maya, Robert, and Diana, and watched the news coverage. The story was no longer just about Project Icarus, but about the ongoing battle between Camille Jo and Victor Lang, about corporate sabotage escalating to dangerous levels, about whether the tech industry had become too cutthroat. This isn't the launch I planned, Camille said quietly. No, Robert agreed. It's better. You didn't just show them technology today. You showed them character, showed them that Horizon doesn't break under pressure. Your grandfather's right, Diana added. The optics actually work in our favor. You're not just a brilliant CEO anymore. You're a survivor who refuses to be beaten. That's powerful. Maya had been quiet throughout dinner and the news watching, but now she spoke up. Ms. Jo, can I ask you something? Of course, Maya. Why keep fighting? I mean, you're already rich and successful. You could just sell the company, retire, never worry about people like Victor Lang again. Why go through all this? Camille smiled, though it was tinged with sadness. That's a fair question, and honestly, there are days I ask myself the same thing, but then I think about David, the young man you saw today. Think about everyone like him who's waiting for technology that could change their lives. If I give up, if I let people like Victor scare me into stopping, what happens to them? Someone else would do it, Maya said. There are other companies, other researchers. Maybe, but maybe not as well, or as ethically, or with the same commitment to making the technology accessible rather than just profitable. Camille leaned forward. Maya, I watched your mother die. You were there, Ethan told me. And I watched my mother die when I was just a few years older than you. We both know how unfair and cruel life can be. But we also get to choose how we respond to that unfairness. We can let it break us, or we can use it to fuel something meaningful. Tears were running down Maya's face now. My mom wanted me to be brave, to do important things. Then honor that. Be brave, do important things. And when people try to stop you, and they will, you keep going anyway. Camille's eyes were also wet. That's the only way forward. Later, after Maya had gone to bed and Robert had retired to his room, Ethan found himself alone with Camille on the back patio.
The fog was rolling in from the bay, and the temperature had dropped, but neither of them seemed inclined to go inside. "I've made a decision," Ethan said. "About your job offer." Camille went very still. "And?" "I'm going to accept. Not forever. I want to keep the farm, maybe use it as a weekend place, somewhere Maya can stay connected to her roots. But I think we should try this. Living here, working for Horizon, seeing what's possible." He looked at her. "If the offer's still open." "It's open. It'll always be open." Camille's smile was radiant despite her exhaustion. "Ethan, you have no idea how much this means to me." "I think I do, but I have conditions." "Name them." "Maya's education comes first. Whatever opportunities Horizon provides, they don't interfere with her being a kid, having a normal childhood, all of that. And if Victor Lang or anyone else threatens her safety, we're gone. No discussion, no debate. Her safety is non-negotiable." "Agreed. Absolutely agreed. Absolutely." Camille extended her good hand. "Partners?" Ethan took her hand, feeling the calluses that came from working on engines, from building things with her own hands. She wasn't just a billionaire CEO. She was someone who understood tools and effort and the satisfaction of making something work. "Partners," he agreed. They stood together watching the fog consume the city, two people who'd been strangers 2 weeks ago and were now bound by shared trauma and mutual respect. The launch might have been sabotaged, but Project Icarus had survived. Victor Lang might still be fighting, but his legal options were dwindling. And Horizon Technologies had gained something unexpected, a mechanic from Oregon who'd become part of its story, part of its future. Whatever came next, trials, challenges, threats they couldn't yet imagine, they'd face it together. Because that's what you did when fate threw people together and gave them a reason to keep going. You kept going, together. And you didn't look back. 3 months later, Ethan stood in the doorway of his new office at Horizon Technologies and marveled at how completely his life had transformed. The space was modest by corporate standards, but felt palatial compared to his workshop in Millfield, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay, a drafting table for mechanical designs, shelves already filling with technical manuals and prototypes. The nameplate on the door read, "Ethan Walker, Director of Practical Applications Division," and he still hadn't gotten used to seeing it. Maya was thriving in ways that made his heart ache with pride and bittersweet joy. She'd enrolled in a private school that specialized in STEM education, where her teachers actually understood her passion for aerodynamics and physics. She spent 2 afternoons a week at Horizon working with Dr. Park on neural interface applications for prosthetic limbs. And she'd joined a robotics club that was already planning their competition strategy for nationals. The farm in Oregon remained theirs, lovingly maintained by Tom Patterson, and visited most weekends when work allowed. Ethan had converted the barn into a proper workshop and was slowly restoring a 1968 Chevy Camaro he'd found in a Sacramento junkyard. It was his meditation, his connection to the past, his reminder that he was still the same person despite the radical changes in circumstances. But the most unexpected change was Camille herself, and what had grown between them. It had started simply enough, working together in her garage workshop on weekend evenings, discussing Project Icarus applications over dinner, sharing the comfortable silence of 2 people who'd been through fire together, and came out stronger. Somewhere along the way, partnership had deepened into friendship, and friendship had begun to feel like something more. Ethan wasn't sure when he'd fallen in love with her. Maybe it was watching her fight for her vision despite every obstacle. Maybe it was seeing her patience with Maya, her genuine interest in helping his daughter flourish. Maybe it was simply the accumulation of small moments, her laugh, when he made a terrible joke, The way she fell asleep reading technical papers on the couch, the fierce intelligence in her eyes when she talked about the future. Whatever the reason, he was in love with Camille Jo, and he was pretty sure she felt the same way. They just hadn't said it yet, both dancing around the admission like teenagers afraid of rejection. The office phone rang, pulling him from his thoughts. It was Diana. Conference room 3, 5 minutes. Camille wants everyone there. What's happening? Victor Lang's trial verdict just came in. Ethan's stomach tightened. The trial had been ongoing for 2 months, a media spectacle that laid bare the depths of corporate espionage and attempted murder. The prosecution had presented overwhelming evidence. The malware signatures, encrypted communications, testimony from Lang's head of security, who'd flipped in exchange for a reduced sentence, financial records showing payments to the private investigator who'd broken into Ethan's workshop. Lang's defense had been predictable. He knew nothing about any sabotage. His employees had acted independently. The evidence was circumstantial at best. But even his expensive lawyers couldn't explain away the encrypted messages found on his personal devices. The ones that explicitly discussed eliminating the Joe problem and ensuring Icarus never launches. Ethan made his way to the conference room, where Camille's core team was gathering. Diana stood by the window, arms crossed. Robert had come down from the house, his weathered face tense with anticipation. Dr. Park and several other department heads filed in, and Camille sat at the head of the table, her expression carefully neutral, though Ethan could see the tension in her shoulders. Maya slipped in beside him, having apparently heard the news during her session with Dr. Park. She reached for his hand and he squeezed it reassuringly. The room's main screen flickered to life, showing a live news feed from outside the federal courthouse. The reporter was mid-sentence when the courthouse doors opened and the jury foreman emerged, followed by attorneys, court officials, and finally Victor Lang himself, flanked by U.S. Marshals. "The verdict has been reached," the reporter said urgently. "We're getting confirmation now. Victor Lang has been found guilty on all counts. Corporate espionage, attempted murder, conspiracy to commit sabotage. He's facing up to 30 years in federal prison." The conference room erupted. Dr. Park was hugging her colleagues. Diana allowed herself a rare smile. Robert closed his eyes in relief. And Camille just sat there, motionless, as if she couldn't quite process that the nightmare was finally over. Ethan moved to her side and put a hand on her shoulder. She looked up at him, and her eyes were wet with tears she'd been holding back for months. "It's done," she whispered. "He can't hurt anyone anymore." No, he can't. On the screen, Victor Lang was being led away in handcuffs, his face a mask of rage and disbelief. The assembled media shouted questions, but he had nothing to say. His empire had crumbled, his reputation destroyed, his freedom forfeit. The man who'd tried to kill Camille Jo to stop her vision had instead ensured its triumph. The celebration that followed was subdued but genuine. Camille addressed her staff via company-wide video, thanking them for their loyalty during the crisis and promising that Horizon would continue to innovate and push boundaries. The stock price jumped 15% on the news. Medical groups and advocacy organizations issued statements applauding the verdict and expressing renewed hope for Project Icarus. But as the afternoon wore on, Ethan noticed Camille growing quieter, more withdrawn. When the office finally emptied and most people had gone home or out to celebrate, he found her alone in her private office, staring out at the darkening bay. "You okay?" he asked from the doorway. "I don't know. I thought I'd feel relieved, vindicated, something positive." She turned to face him. "But all I feel is sad. Richard is still dead. Those months of fear and fighting can't be erased. And Victor, despite everything, we were friends once. Seeing him led away in handcuffs, knowing he'll spend decades in prison." Her voice broke. "It's necessary. It's justice. But it's also tragic." Ethan entered the office and closed the door behind him. "You're allowed to feel complicated things about complicated situations. That doesn't make you weak or naive. I wanted to destroy him, Ethan. When I realized what he'd done, I wanted him to suffer. And now that he will suffer, I feel empty. Like the anger that sustained me for months has nowhere to go anymore." "So you let it go. You acknowledge that justice was served, you honor Richard's memory by continuing the work he died protecting, and you move forward." Ethan moved closer. "You don't have to fight anymore, Camille. You won. She laughed, but it was hollow. The trial is over, but the fight never really ends. There will be other competitors, other threats, other crises that require constant vigilance. That's the price of success in this industry. Then don't do it alone. The words came out before Ethan could second guess them. You have people who care about you. Robert, Diana, Maya, me. He paused. Especially me. Camille looked at him, and something shifted in her expression. The careful CEO facade dropping away to reveal the woman beneath. Vulnerable, exhausted, but also hopeful. What are you saying? I'm saying that over the past 3 months, you've become more than my boss or my friend. You've become, he struggled for the right words, essential. To me, to Maya, to how I understand the world now. And I think maybe I've become important to you too. You have. Her voice was barely audible. God, Ethan, you have no idea. Then maybe it's time we stop pretending this is just friendship or gratitude or circumstance. He closed the distance between them. Maybe it's time we admit what this actually is. Camille reached up and touched his face, her hand gentle against his cheek. I'm afraid. Not of my feelings, those are clear, but of what happens if this doesn't work. You've already given up so much to be here. If we try this and it fails, we're not going to fail, Ethan said with certainty he didn't entirely feel but needed to project. We've survived plane crashes and sabotage and federal trials. I think we can handle a relationship. She laughed, a real laugh this time, and the sound filled him with warmth. When you put it that way, it seems almost easy. It won't be easy, but nothing worthwhile ever is. He kissed her then, gentle and careful, aware that they were standing in her office where anyone could walk in, aware that they were crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. But when she kissed him back, her good arm wrapping around his neck, all his doubts evaporated. This was right. This had been building since the moment he'd pulled her from that burning plane, maybe even written in the stars before that. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Camille was smiling properly for the first time in days. We should probably tell Maya, she said. She already knows. She's been not so subtly hinting that I should ask you out for the past month. Smart kid. She gets it from her mother. They stood together as twilight deepened over San Francisco, two people who'd found each other through tragedy and built something beautiful from the ashes. Outside, the city sparkled with possibility, and for the first time in years, Ethan felt not just alive, but genuinely happy. The official Project Icarus launch happened 2 weeks later, a carefully orchestrated event that attracted global attention. This time, there were no sabotage attempts, no fire alarms, no crises, just the pure power of transformative technology being revealed to a world ready to embrace it. Camille stood on stage in the same auditorium where Victor Lang's attack had disrupted the first attempt, and she commanded the room with confidence and grace. She demonstrated neural interface applications that seemed impossible. Paralyzed patients walking with prosthetic limbs controlled by thought, stroke survivors speaking through digital avatars linked to their brain patterns, artists creating works using only their minds. The medical community responded with immediate enthusiasm. Orders poured in from hospitals and research institutions. Advocacy groups celebrated. And Horizon's stock price soared to record highs, validating everything Camille had fought to protect. Ethan watched from backstage with Maya, who was taking notes for a report she was writing about neural interface ethics. His daughter had become something of an expert on the technology, spending so much time in the labs that some of the researchers joked about recruiting her early. "Dad?" Maya said during a break in the presentation. "Are you happy here? Really happy?" It was a loaded question, and they both knew it. Was he happy having left Oregon, having uprooted their life, having entered this world so different from everything they'd known? "Yeah, baby, I really am." And it was true. The past 3 months had been challenging, learning the corporate environment, understanding cutting-edge technology, navigating the complexities of his relationship with Camille. But they'd also been fulfilling in ways he hadn't experienced since before Sarah's death. "Are you?" Maya considered this seriously. "I miss home sometimes. Miss how quiet it was, how I knew everyone. But Dad, I'm learning things here I never could have learned in Millfield. I'm becoming who Mom hoped I'd be. She looked up at him. I think she'd be proud of us for being brave enough to change. Ethan pulled her into a hug, his throat tight with emotion. She would be. She absolutely would be. After the launch, there was a reception for major donors and industry leaders. Ethan found himself navigating conversations with venture capitalists and tech executives, feeling increasingly comfortable in his role as Horizon's Practical Applications Director. His division was already working on industrial uses for neural interfaces, manufacturing automation that responded to workers' thoughts, vehicle control systems for disabled drivers, construction equipment operated with unprecedented precision. It was meaningful work that mattered, and he was good at it. His mechanical background combined with his military problem-solving experience made him uniquely qualified to bridge the gap between theoretical technology and real-world implementation. You're a natural at this, Camille said, appearing at his elbow during the reception. She looked radiant in a dark blue dress, her arm finally freed from all medical supports, though she still favored it slightly. I'm faking it pretty well, at least. That's what everyone here is doing. The trick is having the confidence to fake it convincingly. She smiled. But you're not faking it anymore, Ethan. You belong here. Your team respects you, your projects are ahead of schedule, and you just closed a deal with Boeing for aviation interface applications. About that, I wanted to talk to you about something. Ethan guided her to a quieter corner of the reception hall. Boeing wants to develop neural interfaces for commercial pilots, better reaction times, reduced error rates, enhanced situational awareness. But given what happened to Richard, he didn't need to finish. Camille's expression had already clouded with complicated emotions. The irony of developing technology for pilots when a plane crash had started this entire journey wasn't lost on either of them. If we do it right, Camille said slowly, we could prevent crashes like Richard's. Make aviation safer for everyone. That would be a worthy legacy, wouldn't it? Turning that tragedy into something that saves lives? I think so, but I wanted to make sure you were comfortable with it before I moved forward. Camille took his hand, not caring who might see. Move forward. Richard would want his death to mean something. This is how we make it mean something. As the reception wound down and guests began departing, Camille made an announcement that surprised everyone except Diana and Robert, who clearly already knew what was coming. Before you all leave, I have one more piece of news to share. Effective immediately, I'm creating a new executive position at Horizon Technologies, Chief Operating Officer. This person will oversee day-to-day operations, manage our growing divisions, and help ensure we scale sustainably as Project Icarus enters the global market. She paused for effect. I'm pleased to announce that Diana Chen has agreed to take on this role. The applause was immediate and enthusiastic. Diana looked simultaneously honored and terrified, which Ethan understood completely. Running security was one thing. Running operations for a multi-billion-dollar company was something else entirely. But if anyone could do it, Diana could. She was brilliant, loyal, and understood Horizon's culture better than almost anyone. After the announcement, Ethan found Diana near the bar, nursing a whiskey. Congratulations, Madam COU. Thanks. I think. Diana took a long sip. Camille's lost her mind, promoting her security chief to executive leadership. She's promoting someone she trusts completely, who has repeatedly demonstrated judgment under pressure. That's not losing her mind. That's being smart. Diana smiled slightly. You're good for her, you know. Camille, I mean. Since you've been together, she's been lighter, more balanced. She still works too hard, but she's not destroying herself anymore. She's good for me too, for Maya, for both of us. Ethan watched Camille across the room, surrounded by congratulatory well-wishers. I didn't think I'd ever feel this way again after Sarah. Didn't think I deserved to. Life doesn't work on deserving. It works on showing up and being open when opportunities present themselves. Diana finished her whiskey. You showed up that night in Oregon. You pulled her from the fire. Everything else follows from that choice. The weeks that followed settled into something resembling normalcy. If normal could include dating a billionaire CEO while working for her company and co-parenting a precocious 12-year-old who was simultaneously thrilled and mortified by the whole situation. Ethan and Camille were careful about their relationship at work, maintaining professional boundaries during business hours. But evenings at her house, their house, as she'd started calling it, were different. They cooked dinner together, worked in the garage on the Mustang restoration, watched Maya and Robert play chess with increasingly competitive intensity. It felt like family. Not the family Ethan had lost, but a new configuration that honored the past while embracing the future. Sarah would always be Maya's mother, would always be the love that shaped Ethan's younger life. But Camille was something different, a partner for who he was becoming, not who he'd been. One Saturday afternoon in late spring, 6 months after the crash, Ethan drove Maya and Camille to Oregon. They'd planned a weekend at the farm, a chance to check on the property, and for Camille to see the place where everything had started. The drive up Interstate 5 took them through changing landscapes, San Francisco's urban density giving way to agricultural valleys, then the rolling hills of southern Oregon, finally arriving at the familiar roads around Millfield. Maya pressed her face to the window as they passed landmarks she recognized, her excitement palpable. The farm looked good. Tom Patterson had kept the grass mowed and the barn maintained. The cornfield where the plane had crashed had been replanted, and new corn was already knee-high, erasing the scar from that terrifying night. But everyone in Millfield knew what had happened here. As they drove through town, Ethan saw people pointing, whispering. Some waved, others just stared. He'd become a local legend, the mechanic who saved a billionaire and then left for the big city. Opinion was divided on whether he was a hero or a traitor to his roots. At the farm, Camille walked slowly around the property, taking in the house where Ethan and Maya had lived, the workshop where he'd rebuilt engines, the field where her plane had fallen from the sky. She was quiet, processing, and Ethan gave her space to work through whatever emotions the place evoked. "This is where you were standing," she finally said, positioning herself in the yard. "When you saw the plane going down." "About there, yeah." "And you ran?" She traced the path with her eyes, across the yard, through the field, to the wreckage. "I didn't really think about it. Just moved." Camille turned to face him, and her eyes were bright with tears. "I was so arrogant before the crash. So focused on my vision, my company, my success. I thought I understood what mattered. Then I woke up in that burning plane and realized I understood nothing." She gestured around them. "This place, this quiet farm in Oregon, this is where my life was saved, where I was given a second chance by someone who didn't know me, didn't owe me anything, just believed that life was worth saving." Any life is worth saving? Not everyone lives that way. Most people calculate, is the risk worth it? What do I gain? What might I lose? You didn't calculate, you just acted. She moved closer to him, "That's extraordinary, Ethan, and I'm so grateful that the universe put me in your path." They stood together in the afternoon sun, and Ethan thought about fate and choice, about how one decision made in fear and instinct had cascaded into everything that came after. If he'd hesitated that night, if he'd stayed in the house with Maya, Camille would have died. Horizon Technologies would have collapsed into corporate warfare. Project Icarus might have been delayed or destroyed, and he and Maya would still be here in Millfield, going through the motions of life without really living it. Instead, they'd found purpose, found family, found futures they hadn't imagined were possible. That evening, they had dinner at the farmhouse. Nothing fancy, just burgers on the grill and corn from Tom's garden. Robert had driven up separately and regaled them with stories about Camille as a child, much to her embarrassment and everyone else's delight. "She was always taking things apart," Robert said, gesturing with his beer. "Radios, toasters, my lawnmower engine one memorable afternoon. Her grandmother would find pieces scattered all over the garage." "I was learning," Camille protested. "You were terrorizing perfectly good appliances." But Robert's voice was full of love. "Even then, you couldn't accept that something worked without understanding how and why. That curiosity is what made you who you are." Maya was listening intently, and Ethan could see her relating to those childhood stories. She was so much like Camille, brilliant, curious, driven to understand the world at a fundamental level. Having Camille in her life was giving Maya a role model who'd walked a similar path and succeeded beyond measure. After dinner, Maya challenged Robert to their ongoing chess tournament, while Ethan and Camille took a walk around the property. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reminded Ethan of the fire from that first night. "I've been thinking about something," Camille said as they walked.
about the future, about where we're headed. Ethan felt a flutter of nervousness. Okay. This past 6 months have been incredible. Getting to know you and Maya, building this relationship, seeing what we could become together. But I'm very aware that we rushed into this because of extraordinary circumstances. You moved your entire life to San Francisco. Maya changed schools. You took a job at my company. She stopped walking and turned to face him. I need to know this is really what you want. Not what you fell into because you saved my life, but what you actively choose. You think I'm here out of obligation? I think gratitude and love can look similar from certain angles. I think you're a good man who might feel responsible for me because of how we met, and I need to know. Her voice wavered. I need to know if you love me, Ethan. Really love me. Not the idea of me, not the circumstances that brought us together, but me. Ethan took her hands, holding them gently. Camille, I love Sarah with everything I had. When she died, I thought that was it, one great love per lifetime, and I'd had mine. I wasn't looking for this, wasn't expecting it. But then you came into my life, and you were brilliant and fierce and vulnerable and strong, and somewhere along the way, I fell completely in love with you. He paused, making sure she heard every word. Not because you're rich or successful or beautiful, though you're all those things, but because of who you are when all of that is stripped away. The woman who works on cars with grease under her fingernails, who checks on Maya's homework even though she's not her mother, who cried when David spoke through the neural interface. That's who I love. Tears were streaming down Camille's face now. I love you too. So much that it terrifies me. I've built my entire adult life around being independent, not needing anyone. And then you showed up and changed everything. He kissed her then, soft and sweet, as the Oregon sunset painted the world in fire around them. And Ethan thought about how life worked in mysterious ways, how tragedy and fortune intertwined, how endings enabled beginnings, how sometimes you had to lose everything to find what you actually needed. When they returned to the house, Maya took one look at their faces and grinned knowingly. Finally, I was wondering how long it would take you two to figure it out. You're 12. You shouldn't be this perceptive, Ethan said. I'm 12 and I live with two people who've been making hard eyes at each other for months. It wasn't exactly subtle, but her smile was genuine, happy. So what does this mean? Are you guys officially together now? We're officially together, Camille confirmed. If that's okay with you. Maya pretended to consider this seriously. Well, you're letting me work in your labs. You're helping Dad with his career. You make him happy. She shrugged. Yeah, I guess you can date my dad. They all laughed, and the tension broke. Robert raised his beer in a toast. To second chances and new beginnings. To families we choose and futures we build. And to that night 6 months ago when everything changed. They clinked glasses, beer for the adults, root beer for Maya, and drank to the improbable journey that had brought them together. The weekend passed in a pleasant blur of farm life and family time. Ethan showed Camille his workshop, where she immediately started suggesting improvements and upgrades. They drove into Millfield proper, where the locals' reception was mixed but mostly warm. Sheriff Daniels pulled Ethan aside to say he was proud of how things had turned out, even if it meant losing a good mechanic. You're always welcome back, the sheriff said, but I think maybe you found where you belong now. Sunday afternoon, before they drove back to San Francisco, they visited Sarah's grave at the cemetery on the edge of town. Ethan hadn't been since they'd moved, and guilt twisted his stomach as they approached the simple headstone. Maya went first, kneeling to arrange the flowers they'd brought. Hi, Mom, I miss you. So much has happened since we were last here. Dad has a girlfriend now. Her name is Camille, and she's amazing. You'd really like her. And I'm studying neural interfaces and robotics and all this incredible stuff. I think I might want to be a scientist like Camille when I grow up. Her voice cracked. I hope you're proud of me. I hope you can see that Dad and I are okay, that we're more than okay. Ethan stepped forward after Maya moved back, and he laid his hand on the cool granite. Hey, Sarah. It's been a while. I'm sorry about that. He took a deep breath. I met someone. Her name is Camille, and I love her. It doesn't replace what we had. Nothing could. But it's something good, something real. And I think you'd want that for me. You always said life was for living, not hiding from. Tears blurred his vision.
I'm trying to live again, Sarah, for me, for Maya, for the future. Thank you for showing me how. Thank you for everything. Camille hung back, giving them privacy, but when Ethan returned to her side, she slipped her hand into his. She was lucky to have you, Camille said softly. And you were lucky to have her. That kind of love doesn't end. It evolves, makes room for new love alongside the old. Thank you for understanding that. I understand because I feel the same way about my mother. She's been gone 24 years, but I still talk to her sometimes, still feel her influence in my decisions. Love doesn't have an expiration date. They drove back to San Francisco as the sun set behind them, leaving Oregon and the past in the rearview mirror. But Ethan didn't feel like he was leaving anything behind. More like he was carrying the past forward into a future that honored where he'd been while embracing where he was going. 2 months later, Horizon Technologies held its annual shareholder meeting, a massive event that attracted global media attention. Project Icarus had exceeded all projections, with over 10,000 units deployed worldwide and waiting lists stretching into next year. The company's stock had tripled in value. Partnerships with major medical institutions were revolutionizing treatment for neurological conditions. And Camille Joe stood on stage, not just as a CEO reporting quarterly earnings, but as a visionary whose dream had transformed into reality. This year has been extraordinary for Horizon Technologies, she told the assembled shareholders. But more importantly, it's been extraordinary for the thousands of people whose lives have been changed by Project Icarus. People who can walk again, speak again, create again. People who refuse to accept limitations and instead chose to expand possibilities. She paused, and her eyes found Ethan in the audience. I've learned something profound this year. Technology alone doesn't change the world. People do. Courage does. The willingness to act when action is required, to show compassion when it's needed, to stand up when standing up matters. 6 months ago, someone tried to kill me to stop this vision. They failed, not because of technology or wealth or power, but because of basic human decency. Because a mechanic from Oregon ran into a burning plane when any rational calculation said he shouldn't. That courage, that's what changes the world. The applause was thunderous, and Ethan felt his face burning with embarrassment as cameras swiveled toward him. But Camille wasn't done. I'm also pleased to announce a new initiative, the Richard Chen Memorial Fund for Aviation Safety. This fund will support research into preventing aircraft disasters, developing better safety technologies, and supporting the families of those lost in aviation accidents. Because every life matters. Every loss teaches us. And every tragedy should push us toward a safer, better future. More applause, this time tinged with emotion. Richard Chen's widow and children were in attendance, having accepted Camille's invitation to be honored. The healing wasn't complete, it never would be, but acknowledgement and purpose helped. After the shareholder meeting, there was a gala dinner for major investors and partners. Ethan found himself seated at the head table between Camille and a venture capitalist who wanted to discuss potential applications for neural interfaces in space exploration. It was surreal, being treated as someone whose opinion mattered in these circles, but he was adapting. You're surprisingly good at this, Camille murmured during a break between courses. Corporate dinners, investor relations, all of it. I'm pretending it's like talking to customers at the shop, just fancier customers with bigger budgets. She laughed. Whatever works. But Ethan, you should know, the board has been incredibly impressed with your division's performance. They're talking about expanding your role, giving you more resources, possibly making you a VP. He struggled to process it. 6 months ago, he'd been fixing transmissions in rural Oregon. Now people were discussing making him a vice president of a major tech company. That's a lot. Only if you want it, there's no pressure. You're already doing valuable work. I'll think about it. But even as he said it, Ethan knew he'd probably accept. Not for the title or the prestige, but because the work mattered. Because he was part of something larger than himself, something that improved people's lives in tangible ways. The evening wound down, and guests began departing. Maya had spent the dinner at a separate table with other executives' children, and had apparently charmed everyone with her knowledge of neural interface theory. Robert had held court with several board members, telling embarrassing stories about Camille's childhood that she would definitely make him pay for later. As they prepared to leave, Diana pulled Ethan aside. I wanted to thank you, she said, For saving Camille, obviously, but also for what you've done since. She's happier than I've ever seen her, more grounded. You've been good for her in ways that go beyond the relationship. She's been good for me too, for Maya, for our whole life. I know, that's why I wanted to say this. Diana hesitated, choosing her words carefully. If you ever hurt her, I will end you, professionally, personally, completely.
Clear? Ethan nodded, understanding this was Diana being protective of someone she loved like family. Crystal clear. But Diana, I'm not going to hurt her. I've already lost one person I loved. I'm not stupid enough to sabotage something this good. Diana studied him for a moment, then nodded. Good. Then welcome to the family, Ethan Walker, officially and permanently. The drive home that night took them through San Francisco's glittering streets, past landmarks that were becoming familiar. The Golden Gate Bridge lit against the night sky, the Transamerica Pyramid marking downtown, the bay reflecting city lights like scattered diamonds. I've been thinking, Camille said as they drove, about the future, about what comes next for us. Ethan glanced at her, trying to read her expression in the dashboard lights. What kind of future are we talking about? The long-term kind. The kind where we stop dancing around what this is and acknowledge what we're building. She took a breath. I know it's soon. I know we've only been together for a few months. But Ethan, I'm 38 years old. I've dated plenty of people, had relationships that looked good on paper but felt empty. This is different. You're different. And I don't want to waste time pretending I don't know where this is headed. Where is it headed? I'm hoping towards something permanent, something committed. You, me, Maya, Robert, a real family, not just people who happen to share space. She pulled into the driveway and turned to face him. I'm saying I want forever, Ethan. If you want that too. His heart was pounding, but not from fear, from possibility, from hope, from the sudden clarity that this was exactly what he wanted. I want that. God, Camille, I want that so much. Good, because I was planning to propose next month, but I'm apparently terrible at keeping secrets. She pulled a small box from her purse, and Ethan realized with shock that she was serious. Ethan Walker, you ran into fire to save my life, and in doing so, you saved it in ways you couldn't have imagined. You've shown me what courage looks like, what kindness means, what it feels like to be loved without condition. Will you marry me? Ethan stared at the ring box, then at Camille's face, hopeful and vulnerable and absolutely certain all at once. His mind flashed through the journey that had brought them here, the crash, the fire, the investigation, the trial, the months of building something real and lasting from ashes and trauma. Yes, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Yes, I'll marry you. She opened the box to reveal a simple platinum band. No diamonds, no flash, just clean lines and solid metal, perfect for a man who worked with his hands. He let her slip it onto his finger, and it felt right in a way he hadn't expected. I love you, Camille said. I love Maya. I love the life we're building. And I promise to spend every day earning the gift you gave me that night in Oregon. You already have, Ethan said, pulling her close. Every single day. They sat in the car for a long moment, holding each other, letting the magnitude of their commitment settle in. Then they went inside to tell Maya and Robert, who reacted with joy that was both genuine and completely unsurprising. Apparently, everyone had known this was coming, except Ethan himself. The wedding was held 3 months later at the farm in Oregon, a small ceremony that brought together both sides of Ethan's life, the rural Oregon community that had raised him and the San Francisco tech world that had embraced him. Sheriff Daniels officiated, having gotten ordained online specifically for the occasion. Tom Patterson and Kelly Morrison stood up as witnesses. The reception was held in a tent in the same field where Camille's plane had crashed, transforming the site of tragedy into a celebration of love and new beginnings. Maya served as maid of honor, wearing a dress she'd picked out with Camille's help, and giving a toast that made everyone cry. When my mom died, I thought our family was over, she said, her voice carrying across the tent. I thought it would just be Dad and me forever, trying to hold on to what we'd lost. But then Camille literally fell from the sky, and Dad ran into fire to save her, and somehow that became the best thing that ever happened to us. She raised her glass. To Camille and Dad,
to second chances, to families that grow in unexpected ways, and to Mom, who I know is watching and smiling because her wish for us to be happy finally came true. The celebration lasted into the night, farm and city blending seamlessly. Robert teaching line dancing to tech executives, Diana showing Maya's friends some basic self-defense moves. Dr. Park engaged in animated discussion with Tom Patterson about agricultural automation using neural interfaces. And in the middle of it all, Ethan danced with his new wife under strings of lights, marveling at the improbable path that had led them here. "Thank you," Camille whispered against his shoulder, "for running into that fire, for giving me this life." "Thank you for surviving," Ethan replied, "for showing Maya and me what's possible when you refuse to give up." They swayed together as the night deepened around them, and Ethan thought about fate and choice, about how one moment of courage had cascaded into everything beautiful that followed. The crash could have ended in tragedy for Camille, for Horizon, for the thousands of people depending on Project Icarus. Instead, it became a beginning, a spark that ignited futures none of them could have predicted. Life worked that way sometimes. You make one decision to help a stranger, to take a chance, to choose love over fear, and suddenly the whole world shifts. Paths appear where there were none before. Impossible becomes inevitable. As the celebration continued around them, as fireflies rose from the Oregon fields like tiny stars, as their family, biological and chosen, laughed and danced and embraced the joy of the moment, Ethan Walker understood something fundamental. Fate didn't give second chances. People did. And when you were brave enough to accept those chances, when you opened yourself to possibility despite risk, despite fear, despite all the rational reasons to play it safe, that's when miracles happened. That's when life rewarded courage with grace. That's when the sky fell, and from the ashes, phoenixes rose.